I followed my husband to his hotel and caught him with another woman cheating story. I couldn't believe I was staring at a message from a complete stranger, a woman I'd never met, telling me my husband wasn't alone. Marcus had left for Dallas 3 days ago. Another conference, another hotel, another week of me holding down everything at home while he networked and closed deals. And I trusted him. God, I trusted him so much it hurts to even think about now. The message came through Instagram, a DM from an account I didn't recognize. No profile picture, just a name, Shanice_ATL, and it said, "Hey girl, I don't know you, but I think you should know your husband isn't in Dallas alone. I saw him at the W last night with someone." My stomach dropped and I sat there on the couch, Scandal playing in the background, reading it again and again, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone. I typed back immediately, "Who is this? What are you talking about?" And the 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, and then she said, "I'm a bartender at the W in Midtown. Your husband came in last night with a woman. They were all over each other. I recognized him from your Instagram. I'm sorry, I felt like you needed to know." I felt like the room was spinning because the W in Midtown is Atlanta, and Marcus was supposed to be in Dallas, unless he wasn't, unless this whole trip was a lie from the start. I clicked on her profile, private account, 47 followers, nothing suspicious about it, just someone trying to protect their peace. But the fact that she went out of her way to message me made it feel real, too real. I went to Marcus's location on Find My iPhone. We'd shared locations years ago after I got stranded with a flat tire and he couldn't find me. Never thought I'd be using it like this, and the pin dropped right there in Atlanta, in Midtown. Right near the W Hotel. My vision blurred and I had to blink back tears just to see the screen because he lied. He looked me in the face 3 days ago, kissed me goodbye, told me he loved me, and lied. I called him and it went straight to voicemail. Called again, voicemail, texted, "Call me now," and got nothing, just radio silence. So I called the W Hotel directly and my voice was steady even though my insides were screaming. I said, "Hi. Can you connect me to Marcus Thompson's room, please?" And the front desk lady paused, clicked some keys, said, "One moment." And that hold music made me want to throw my phone across the room. Then she came back and said, "I'm transferring you now," and it rang once, twice, 3 times, and then a woman answered, not Marcus, a woman, her voice groggy and annoyed saying, "Hello." I froze. Every nerve in my body went cold. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe, and she said, "Hello," again, more irritated this time, and I hung up. My chest felt like it was caving in because a woman answered his hotel room at 10 in the morning, in Atlanta, when he was supposed to be in Dallas. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes just staring at the wall, and then something in me snapped. I wasn't about to sit here and fall apart. I needed to see this for myself. I grabbed my keys and my purse and I was out the door. The W was only 20 minutes away in traffic, but I made it in 12. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out in the lobby, but I walked up to the front desk like I belonged there, confident, unbothered, even though I was breaking inside. I smiled big and warm and said, "Hi, I'm here to surprise my husband, Marcus Thompson. Can you tell me what room he's in?" And the guy at the desk hesitated, said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't give out room numbers." I leaned in, dropped my voice, said, "Look, it's our anniversary. I flew in to surprise him. Please, I just want to see my husband." And he looked at me, looked at his computer, sighed, and said, "Room 804. I thanked him and headed straight for the elevators, my hands trembling as I hit the button, and the ride up felt like forever. Every floor that passed made my stomach twist tighter. When the doors opened on the 8th floor, I stepped out and followed the signs. 804 was at the end of the hall, and I stood outside that door for a full minute because part of me wanted to turn around, pretend I never saw that message, go home and live in blissful ignorance, but I couldn't. I knocked, 3 sharp knocks, and there was silence, then shuffling, whispers, the lock clicked, the door opened a crack, and there he was, Marcus, my husband, standing there in a hotel robe, hair messy, eyes wide, saying, "Baby, what are you doing here?" His voice cracking, guilt written all over his face. I pushed the door open, stepped inside, and there she was, sitting on the bed, wrapped in a sheet, her makeup smudged, my husband's clothes on the floor next to hers. She looked at me, I looked at her. Marcus stood frozen between us like a deer in headlights, and I said, "So this is Dallas." My voice calm, too calm, the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. Marcus started stammering, "Baby, listen, this isn't what it looks like. I can explain," and I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because that's what they all say. Every cheating man in history has used that exact line. The woman on the bed pulled the sheet tighter around herself and said, "Marcus, who is this?" And I turned to her, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "I'm his wife. Who the hell are you?" Her face went pale, and she looked at Marcus like he'd just betrayed her too, like she didn't know, like maybe he'd told her he was single or divorced or some other lie. And she said, "His wife? Marcus, you told me you were separated." And there it was, the web of lies unraveling right in front of me, because not only was he cheating, he was telling this woman we were separated when I'd just kissed him goodbye 3 days ago. I looked back at Marcus and said, "Separated? Is that what you told her? When exactly did we separate, Marcus? Because I must have missed that conversation." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out, just pathetic silence, and the woman got up, started grabbing her clothes, said, "I can't believe this. You're disgusting," and I almost felt bad for her, almost, because she was a victim here too. Just not my priority. She got dressed fast, grabbed her purse, shot Marcus one last look of pure disgust, and walked past me out the door, and then it was just the two of us, me and the man I'd built a life with, standing in a hotel room that smelled like betrayal. I walked over to the bed, sat down on the edge, looked at the rumpled sheets, the 2 coffee cups on the nightstand, the room service tray with breakfast for 2, and I felt this strange calm wash over me because the wondering was over. The paranoia I'd convinced myself was crazy was actually real, and now I knew. Marcus finally found his voice and said, "Baby, please, let me explain. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything," and I held up my hand to stop him because I'd heard enough. I'd seen enough, and nothing he could say would change what I'd just walked in on. I said, "How long?" and he hesitated, looked away, and I said it again, louder, "How long, Marcus?" And he mumbled 6 months, like that would somehow hurt less than saying it clearly. 6 months, half a year of lying to my face, half a year of fake business trips and late nights at the office, half a year of him coming home and kissing me like everything was normal while he was building a whole other life behind my back. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the Atlanta skyline, and said, "I want you to know that I loved you. I gave you everything, and you threw it away for what? For her, for the thrill, for the ego boost of having 2 women," and my voice didn't break, didn't waver, because I was done crying over him. He tried to come closer, tried to touch my shoulder, and I stepped back, said, don't you dare touch me," because his hands felt contaminated now. Everything about him felt dirty. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and started recording, Marcus looking confused, saying, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm documenting this, your confession, this hotel room, all of it. Because when I file for divorce, I want to make sure the judge knows exactly who you are." His face went from guilty to panicked real quick, and he said, "Divorce? Baby, come on, we can work through this. We can go to counseling," and I actually laughed again because the audacity of this man thinking I would stay, thinking I would work through him sleeping with another woman for 6 months, was genuinely insane. I recorded him standing there in his robe, recorded the hotel room, the evidence of his betrayal, and then I stopped, put my phone away, and said, "I'll be moved out by the time you get home. Don't bother trying to contact me. My lawyer will be in touch." I walked toward the door, and he followed me, begging now, "Please, don't do this. I love you. I made a mistake," and I turned around one last time and said, "You didn't make a mistake, Marcus. You made a choice, over and over again for 6 months, and now I'm making mine." I left him standing there in that hotel room and took the elevator back down, walked through the lobby with my head high even though I wanted to collapse, got in my car, and the second I closed the door the tears came. Not sad tears, angry tears. Because I'd wasted 5 years of my life on a man who didn't deserve me. I drove home and immediately started packing his things, every shirt, every pair of shoes, Every reminder of him went into trash bags, and I piled them all in the garage because I wanted them out of my sight. I called my girl Tasha and told her everything, and she came over within the hour with wine and tissues and righteous anger, saying I knew something was off with him. I never trusted his ass, and honestly, I needed to hear that. Needed someone to validate that my gut had been right all along. That night Marcus called 17 times, texted 34 messages, all the same desperate bullshit. I'm sorry. Please talk to me. I love you. I'll do anything, and I blocked his number because I didn't need his apologies, didn't need his explanations, didn't need anything from him anymore. I contacted a divorce attorney the next morning, a woman Tasha recommended who had a reputation for eating cheating husbands alive in court, and when I walked into her office and told her my story, she smiled, actually smiled, and said, "Oh honey, we're going to take him for everything he's got." Turns out Georgia is a fault-based divorce state, meaning his infidelity actually mattered, and because we'd been married 5 years and I'd supported him through grad school while he built his career, I was entitled to alimony and a significant portion of our assets. Marcus tried to come home 2 days later and found the locks changed, his stuff in the garage, and a note on the door that said, "You can pick up your things between 2 and 4 p.m. on Saturday. My brother will be here to supervise," because I wasn't about to deal with him alone. He showed up that Saturday looking like he hadn't slept, eyes red, face haggard, and my brother Marcus, yeah, we had the same name which always annoyed him, stood there arms crossed while cheating Marcus loaded his trash bags into his car, and it felt poetic somehow. Having a real man watch a fake one pack up his lies. The divorce took 4 months to finalize, and in that time I found out even more. Found messages between him and at least 2 other women, found credit card statements for hotels and dinners I was never at. Found a whole secret life I'd been blind to because I trusted him. My attorney used all of it, every text, every receipt, every piece of evidence, and when we walked into that courtroom, Marcus looked terrified because he knew he was caught, knew there was no talking his way out of this. The judge looked at the evidence, looked at Marcus with pure disdain, and awarded me the house, alimony for 3 years, and half of his retirement account, and Marcus had the nerve to look shocked, like he expected to cheat and get away with it consequence-free. I walked out of that courtroom feeling lighter than I had in months, like I'd finally shed dead weight, and when Marcus tried to stop me in the hallway, tried one last time to apologize, I looked at him and said I hoped she was worth it and kept walking. Shanice, the bartender who'd messaged me, reached out again a few weeks after the divorce was final, said, "Hey girl, I've been thinking about you. I hope you're okay," and I thanked her, told her she'd saved me from wasting any more years on a man who didn't value me. Told her she was the real one for reaching out when she didn't have to. She said she'd seen too many women get played at that bar, said she had a sixth sense for men who were up to no good, and when she saw Marcus that night with his wedding ring in his pocket and his hands all over that woman, she knew she had to say something. I sold the house 6 months later because I didn't want to live in a space that held so many memories of a lie, took the money and moved into a high-rise in Buckhead, started over completely, new place, new energy, new life. Marcus tried to reach out on my birthday, sent flowers to my new address somehow, and I threw them in the trash without reading the card because I didn't need his performative gestures, didn't need his guilt offerings. I ran into him a year later at a restaurant. He was with someone new, and when our eyes met across the room, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering feelings, just indifference, and that's when I knew I'd truly moved on. He looked like he wanted to come over, wanted to talk, but I turned back to my date, a man who'd proven himself honest and steady and nothing like Marcus, and I didn't give my ex another glance. The audacity of men who cheat is something I'll never understand. The way they think they can have everything, the devoted wife at home, and the excitement on the side. Like we're not human beings with feelings and dignity and the right to be respected. But here's what I learned. You can't make someone value you. You can't love someone into being faithful. All you can do is know your worth and walk away when someone shows you they don't see it. And I'm grateful now. Grateful for Shanice's message. Grateful for that knock on room 804. Grateful for the truth, even though it shattered my world, because staying with Marcus would have shattered me even more. I'm 32 now, living my best life, traveling, thriving in my career, dating intentionally, and I've never been happier because I'm not settling, not ignoring red flags, not letting anyone make me feel like I'm asking for too much when all I want is basic respect and loyalty. Sometimes I think about that version of me sitting on the couch reading that Instagram message, how scared she was, how her whole world was about to implode, and I want to tell her it's going to hurt, but you're going to survive. You're going to come out stronger. You're going to realize you never needed him. You just needed to believe in yourself. And to anyone listening who's in that place right now, who just found out, who's reading the texts or seeing the receipts or standing outside a hotel room door, I'm telling you what I wish someone had told me. Leave. Don't wait for more proof. Don't give them another chance. Don't believe the tears and the promises. Just leave and don't look back, because you deserve someone who would never put you in that position to begin with. Marcus texts me sometimes, even now, 3 years later, saying he's sorry, saying he thinks about me, saying he made the biggest mistake of his life, and I don't respond because my silence is the only answer he deserves. I'm happy, genuinely happy, and he's still out there trying to fill whatever void made him think cheating was acceptable, and that's not my problem anymore. That's his, and I'm free. I started therapy about 6 months after the divorce, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand how I'd missed the signs, how I'd let myself be so blind to what was happening right in front of me. My therapist, Dr. Williams, she didn't let me sit in that victim space for long. She said, "You didn't miss signs. He was deliberately hiding them. That's what cheaters do. They gaslight you into thinking you're paranoid when your intuition is screaming the truth, and hearing that released something in me I didn't know I was holding on to." She helped me see that I'd been so busy being the perfect wife, so focused on supporting Marcus and building our life together, that I'd stopped paying attention to myself, stopped listening to my own needs, stopped noticing when things fell off. There were signs though. Looking back, I can see them clearly now, the way he started going to the gym more, upgrading his wardrobe, being extra protective of his phone, coming home and showering immediately before even greeting me. All those little changes I'd explained away as him just taking better care of himself. I remember one night about 8 months before I found out, we were lying in bed and I said, "You feel different lately, like distant," and he'd rolled over, kissed my forehead, said, "I'm just stressed with work, baby. Nothing to worry about." And I'd believed him because why wouldn't I? He was my husband. That's what gets me the most. Not just the cheating, but the ease with which he lied, the way he could look in my eyes and feed me bullshit with a straight face, the way he made me doubt my own instincts when they were trying to protect me. Dr. Williams said that's the real damage of infidelity. Not just the broken trust, but the way it makes you question your own judgment, makes you wonder if you can ever trust yourself again. And working through that took longer than getting over Marcus ever did. I joined this online support group for women who'd been through similar situations, and hearing their stories made me realize I wasn't alone, wasn't crazy, wasn't the only one who'd been blindsided by someone they thought they knew. One woman in the group, her husband had been cheating for 10 years with multiple women. Another found out her husband had a whole second family in another state, and my situation, as devastating as it was, could have been so much worse. But pain is pain. You can't measure it against someone else's trauma, and what Marcus did to me was enough, more than enough to justify every decision I made after. I started dating again about a year after the divorce was final. Nothing serious at first, just getting back out there, remembering what it felt like to be wanted without the weight of betrayal hanging over everything. The first guy I went out with, David, he was nice enough, but halfway through dinner, he made some joke about his crazy ex-wife, and I immediately shut down because any man who talks about his ex like that is telling you exactly who he is. I learned to watch for the red flags I'd ignored with Marcus, the love bombing, the inconsistencies in stories, the way some men would push for commitment too fast or get defensive when I asked basic questions about their life. I dated a few guys who seemed promising until they weren't. One who still had dating apps on his phone while we were supposedly exclusive. Another who'd conveniently forget to mention he was technically still married until I found his wedding photos on Facebook. It was exhausting and demoralizing, and there were nights I wondered if all men were just variations of Marcus, if loyalty was just some fantasy I'd been sold that didn't actually exist in real life. But then I met James at a friend's birthday party. He wasn't my usual type, quieter, more reserved. Worked as an architect and spoke about his projects with this genuine passion that was actually refreshing after dealing with so many men who couldn't talk about anything but themselves. He asked for my number, and I almost didn't give it to him because I was so tired of being disappointed, but something about him felt different, felt safe in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. Our first date was coffee, simple, low pressure, and he asked me questions, real questions, about my life and my work and what I wanted for my future, and he actually listened to the answers instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. I told him on the third date that I'd been married before, that it had ended badly, that I had trust issues I was working through, and he didn't run, didn't make it weird, just said, I get it, we all have history, I'm not in a rush, and meant it. He was consistent, showed up when he said he would, texted back in reasonable time frames, introduced me to his friends and family without hesitation, had his location shared with me from day one without me even asking. It took me 6 months to fully trust him, 6 months of waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to reveal himself as just another Marcus in disguise. But he never did. He just kept being honest and present and everything Marcus had pretended to be. We've been together 2 years now, and I'm not saying it's perfect. No relationship is, but it's real. It's honest, and I never have to wonder if he's lying to me because he's shown me over and over that transparency is just who he is. James knows about Marcus, knows the whole story, and he's never once made me feel crazy for being cautious or for needing reassurance when my anxiety spikes. He understands that trust is something I'm rebuilding slowly, and he's patient with that process. I ran into the woman from the hotel room once, completely random. We were at the same brunch spot in Midtown, and I recognized her immediately even though it had been almost 3 years. She saw me too, and for a second we just stared at each other, and then she got up, walked over to my table, and said, I'm sorry, I know that doesn't mean much, but I didn't know he was married until you showed up that day. I believed her because I'd seen her face that morning, seen the genuine shock when she realized Marcus had lied to her too, and I said, I know, he fooled both of us, and she nodded, thanked me for not hating her, and walked away. I don't hate her, never did really, because she wasn't the problem, Marcus was. He was the one who made vows and broke them. He was the one who chose to deceive everyone around him, and she was just another casualty of his selfishness. My mom asked me once if I regretted marrying Marcus, if I wished I could go back and never meet him, and I thought about it for a long time before answering because the truth is complicated. I said no, I don't regret it, because that relationship taught me what I will and won't tolerate, showed me my own strength, forced me to rebuild myself into someone who knows her worth and won't compromise it for anyone. If I hadn't gone through that, I might have settled for less, might have ignored red flags in future relationships, might have never developed the standards I have now that protect me from ending up in that situation again. Marcus was a lesson, an expensive, painful lesson, but a lesson nonetheless, and I'm grateful for what I learned even if I'm not grateful for how I learned it. I still have Shanice on Instagram. We don't talk regularly, but every now and then she checks in, sends me a message asking how I'm doing, and I always respond because without her I might still be in that marriage, might still be living a lie. She told me recently that she's gotten messages from other women thanking her for exposing their partners too, that she's made it her mission at the bar to look out for women being played, and I think that's beautiful. The way she turned witnessing someone's betrayal into a form of sisterhood. There's this quote I saw somewhere that said, sometimes the person you'd take a bullet for is the one behind the trigger, and that hit different, because that's exactly what Marcus was. I would have done anything for him, and he used that devotion as cover to destroy me. But here's the thing about being destroyed. You get to decide how you rebuild. You get to choose what version of yourself rises from the ashes, and I chose to become someone who would never ignore her intuition again. Never make herself small to accommodate a man's ego. Never settle for breadcrumbs when she deserves the whole damn meal. I look at my life now, my career thriving, my friendships deeper, my relationship healthy, my peace protected, and I realized that losing Marcus wasn't a loss at all. It was a gain. I gained myself back. People ask me sometimes if I think he's changed, if I think he regrets what he did, if I think he's being faithful to whoever he's with now, and honestly, I don't care. His character development, or lack thereof, is no longer my concern. What I know is that people who cheat once usually cheat again because the issue isn't the person they're cheating with, it's something broken inside them, some inability to be satisfied, some need for validation that no one person can fill. Marcus is probably still out there doing the same thing to someone new, probably still lying and gaslighting and convincing some other woman that she's paranoid while he builds his secret life, and I hope she finds out sooner than I did. I hope someone messages her the way Shanice messaged me. I hope she has the strength to walk away. I hope she doesn't waste 5 years trying to fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. My advice to anyone who's been cheated on is this: don't try to understand it. Don't torture yourself trying to figure out what you did wrong or what you could have done differently, because the truth is you did nothing wrong. Their cheating has nothing to do with you and everything to do with their own brokenness. Leave, heal, rebuild, and don't ever let them convince you that you're bitter or holding a grudge when you refuse to give them another chance, because walking away from disrespect isn't bitterness, it's self-respect. I'm living proof that you can come out the other side of betrayal stronger, happier, more whole than you were before, because when you stop wasting energy on someone who doesn't deserve it, you have so much more to pour into yourself and the people who actually value you. 3 years ago, I was sitting on a couch reading a message that would change my life, and if I could go back and tell that version of me anything, I'd say thank you for being brave enough to knock on that hotel room door. Thank you for not making excuses for him. Thank you for choosing yourself even when it hurt. Because that decision, that moment of choosing my own dignity over a comfortable lie, that's what saved me, and I'd make that same choice 1,000 times over. Marcus is still texting, still apologizing, still trying to rewrite history in a way that makes him look less terrible, and I'm still not responding because my silence is the most powerful thing I can give him, the absence of my attention. The void where his access to me used to be. He lost a woman who loved him unconditionally, and I lost a man who didn't know how to appreciate that, and those two losses are not the same, not even close. I won even though it didn't feel like winning at the time. I won because I'm free, because I'm happy, because I'm with someone who would never make me question if I'm enough. And to everyone who's still in the thick of it, who's reading this and seeing themselves in my story, I'm telling you right now, you're going to be okay, better than okay. You're going to look back one day and thank yourself for leaving, for not settling, for believing you deserved more than lies and betrayal. Walk away, don't look back, and watch how quickly your life transforms when you stop accepting crumbs from someone who should have been giving you the whole damn cake. That's my story, that's my truth, and I'm not ashamed of any of it because I came out the other side exactly who I was meant to be, and Marcus is still out there trying to figure out who he is without me holding him together. I'm done giving him my energy, done letting his betrayal define my narrative. I'm writing a new story now, one where I'm the hero, not the victim, and it's the best story I've ever told. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually grateful for that Instagram message now, grateful for the way it forced me to stop living in denial and face a truth I'd been avoiding for longer than I realized. Because looking back, there were moments even before those 6 months where things felt off, little inconsistencies I'd brushed aside, times when Marcus's story didn't quite add up, but I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid or insecure. Like this one time about a year before I found out, I came home early from a girls' trip because one of my friends got food poisoning and we had to cut it short, and when I walked in the house Marcus looked startled, genuinely shocked to see me. And there was this weird energy in the air I couldn't quite place. He'd cleaned the whole house, which he never did, had fresh sheets on the bed, had taken out the trash, and when I asked why everything was so spotless, he said he'd just felt like being productive, but something about it felt staged, like he'd been covering tracks. I found a wine glass in the dishwasher that wasn't mine, a lipstick shade I didn't own, and when I asked about it, he said his sister had stopped by earlier that week, which made sense except his sister lived in Texas and hadn't mentioned visiting. But I didn't push it because I didn't want to be that wife. That's what they count on, cheaters. They count on you not wanting to be that wife, not wanting to seem crazy or jealous or controlling, so you swallow your questions and ignore your gut and let them gaslight you into thinking you're imagining things. I wish I'd trusted myself back then. Wish I'd investigated further instead of accepting his explanation at face value, because maybe I could have ended it sooner, saved myself some of those 6 months of being played. But I also know that I wasn't ready then, wasn't strong enough to face the truth, still believed our marriage was worth fighting for even if I had to fight alone, and sometimes you have to reach that breaking point before you can walk away. The breaking point for me wasn't just finding him in that hotel room, it was everything that came after, the way he tried to minimize it, the way he made it seem like I was overreacting, the way he said it didn't mean anything, like that was supposed to make me feel better. If it didn't mean anything, then why'd you risk everything for it? Why'd you lie to my face for 6 months? Why'd you tell her we were separated? Why'd you create this whole alternate reality where I didn't exist except as an obstacle to your happiness? He tried the typical playbook after I left. First came the desperate apologies and grand gestures, the flowers and the handwritten letters, and the showing up at my job trying to talk to me until my coworkers had to escort him out. Then came the anger phase when he realized I wasn't coming back. Suddenly I was the bad guy. I was being unreasonable. I wasn't willing to work on the marriage. I was throwing away 5 years over one mistake. As if 6 months of deliberate deception was just a simple mistake. He told his family I'd blindsided him, that I'd given up without trying, that I was being vindictive and cruel, and some of them believed him because he's always been good at playing the victim, at twisting narratives to make himself look better. His mother called me crying, begging me to reconsider, telling me that all marriages go through rough patches, that I needed to be more forgiving, that divorce was a sin, and I'd regret throwing away my family. I told her I didn't throw anything away. Her son did when he decided another woman was worth more than his vows, and if she wanted to be mad at someone, she should direct that energy toward the person who actually destroyed this marriage, and she hung up on me. His father reached out separately, apologized for his wife, said he didn't know the full story, but from what he'd gathered Marcus had messed up badly, and he didn't blame me for leaving, and that phone call meant more to me than any apology Marcus ever gave. It's interesting how betrayal reveals people's true characters, not just the person who betrayed you, but everyone around them. You see who makes excuses for bad behavior, and who holds people accountable, and that tells you everything you need to know. My family rallied around me in ways I didn't expect. My dad, who'd always liked Marcus and called him son, stopped speaking to him entirely. My mom, who's usually all about forgiveness and second chances, told me she was proud of me for leaving. My younger sister said she'd never liked him anyway, which was news to me, but I appreciated the loyalty. My friends were split. Most of them supported my decision completely, but a few, the ones who were married and maybe dealing with their own relationship issues, tried to convince me to give him another chance, said counseling could fix this, said I was giving up too easily. I lost some friendships over it because I couldn't be around people who thought I should have stayed, who didn't understand that staying would have destroyed me slowly, who valued the appearance of marriage over my actual well-being. But the friends I kept, the ones who showed up with wine and tissues and righteous anger, those friendships got stronger, deeper, became the foundation I built my new life on. Tasha became my rock during those first few months. She was at my house almost every day, making sure I ate, making sure I got out of bed, making sure I wasn't drowning in grief and anger, and I don't know if I would have survived without her. She was the one who pushed me to go to therapy, who helped me pack Marcus's things, who sat with me while I cried ugly tears and questioned everything I thought I knew about love and commitment and my own judgment. She also kept me from doing stupid things like checking his social media obsessively or driving past his new apartment or reaching out to him in moments of weakness. She'd take my phone and say, "Not today, Satan. We're not giving him that power." I found out later that Marcus had tried to contact her, tried to get her to convince me to talk to him, and she'd told him exactly where he could go, and it wasn't anywhere polite, and I loved her even more for that. Having good people around you when your world falls apart isn't just helpful, it's essential, because those dark moments when you're questioning if you made the right choice, when you're lonely and missing what you thought you had, those are the moments when you need someone to remind you why you left. The loneliness was real, though. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. Going from sharing your life with someone to sleeping alone in a quiet house, cooking for one, having no one to tell about your day. It's an adjustment that hits harder than you expect. There were nights I'd reach for my phone to text Marcus about something random, some inside joke or stupid meme, and then I'd remember that person didn't exist anymore. The Marcus I thought I knew was a fiction. And the real Marcus wasn't someone I wanted to share anything with. I had to grieve not just the relationship, but the future I'd imagined, the kids we'd talked about having, the house we were saving for, the retirement plans and vacations and growing old together. All of it gone because he couldn't keep his dick in his pants. And yes, I'm still bitter about that specifically, about how he threw away decades of potential happiness for what? Some excitement, some ego boost, some woman he's probably not even with anymore because relationships built on betrayal rarely last. I saw on social media through a mutual friend that he'd dated the woman from the hotel for a few months after our divorce, but it didn't work out, shocker. Turns out when you start a relationship with someone who helped you cheat, trust becomes an issue. Who would have thought? Part of me wanted to reach out to her and say, told you so, but honestly, she'd already learned that lesson the hard way, and I wasn't interested in rubbing salt in wounds. I'd moved on, and she could figure out her own path. Marcus tried to date other people too from what I heard, but apparently he struggled because word gets around in Atlanta, especially in our social circles, and women talk, and nobody wants to date the guy who cheated on his wife for 6 months. His reputation took a hit, and I can't say I feel bad about that. Actions have consequences, and one of those consequences is that people remember how you move, and they judge you accordingly. I've built a good life now, better than good actually. My career took off after the divorce because I finally had the mental space to focus on myself instead of managing a relationship that was rotting from the inside. I got promoted twice in 2 years, started making more money than Marcus and I ever made together, bought myself a car I actually wanted instead of the practical sedan he'd convinced me was the smarter choice, started traveling to places I'd always wanted to go. I went to Bali by myself, spent 2 weeks in Thailand, took a girlfriend trip to Dubai, did a yoga retreat in Costa Rica, lived my life in full color instead of the muted gray my marriage had become without me even realizing it. James has been part of that journey too. He encourages me to chase my dreams, never makes me feel guilty for prioritizing myself, celebrates my wins like they're his own, and that kind of support is something I didn't even know I was missing until I had it. We're talking about getting engaged soon, which terrifies me if I'm being honest, not because I don't trust him, but because I'm still carrying some scar tissue from Marcus, still have moments where I worry the other shoe will drop. But James is patient with that. He understands that my trauma isn't about him. He's willing to move at my pace, and he's shown me through his actions that he's nothing like my ex, that not all men are incapable of loyalty and honesty. I think about the version of me who was married to Marcus and I barely recognize her. She was so focused on being the perfect wife, on making him happy, on keeping the peace, that she forgot to ask if she was happy, if her needs were being met, if she was getting back even half of what she was giving. I'm not that woman anymore. I won't shrink myself to make someone else comfortable, won't ignore red flags to avoid conflict, won't accept less than I deserve just because I'm afraid of being alone. Being alone is better than being with someone who makes you feel alone. That's something I learned the hard way, and it's a lesson I'll carry with me forever. Marcus represents a chapter of my life that's closed now, not forgotten because I learned too much to forget, but definitely closed, and I'm not interested in reopening it no matter how many times he tries to rewrite the ending. He wanted me to be his safety net while he explored other options, wanted me to be the stable, comfortable choice he could come home to after his adventures, and I refused to be anyone's backup plan ever again. I'm someone's first choice now, someone's only choice, and that's what I deserved all along. I just had to lose everything to realize it. The journey from that hotel room to where I am now wasn't easy. It was messy and painful, and there were setbacks, days when I felt like I was moving backward instead of forward, moments when I wondered if I'd ever trust anyone again. But I kept going, kept healing, kept choosing myself over and over until choosing myself became natural instead of radical, and that's the real victory here. Not that I survived Marcus's betrayal, but that I used it as fuel to become someone who would never tolerate that treatment again, someone who knows her worth isn't tied to whether a man can stay faithful, Someone who understands that his cheating was about his character, not my value. I hope my story helps someone who's going through this right now, someone who just found out, someone who's deciding whether to stay or go, someone who's questioning their own judgment and wondering if they'll ever feel whole again. You will. I promise you will. It takes time and work and support, but you will come out the other side stronger than you ever thought possible, and you'll look back and thank yourself for having the courage to walk away. Don't let anyone convince you that leaving is giving up. Leaving is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. It's choosing yourself when someone else has chosen to disrespect you, and there's nothing weak about that. Marcus is still out there somewhere, still living his life, still dealing with the consequences of his choices, and I'm here living mine, and our paths don't cross anymore, and that's exactly how it should be. I'm free, I'm happy, I'm loved by someone who deserves me, and Marcus is just a story I tell now, a cautionary tale, a reminder of what I survived and how far I've come. That's how it ends, not with him begging for me back or some dramatic confrontation, but with me moving on completely, building a life so full and beautiful that he becomes irrelevant, a footnote in my history instead of a defining chapter. And that, more than any revenge I could have planned, more than any public humiliation or vindictive move, is the ultimate victory, living well, loving better, and never looking back. I saw him one more time after that random restaurant encounter, and it was at a place neither of us expected, a funeral for a mutual friend's parent, someone we'd both known during our marriage, and there was no avoiding each other in that small church. He looked older, more worn down, like life had been heavy on him, and when our eyes met across the pews I felt absolutely nothing, no anger, no sadness, no lingering attachment. Just the same feeling you get when you see a stranger on the street. After the service, everyone gathered at the family's house for the repast, and Marcus cornered me in the kitchen while I was refilling my plate, said, "Can we talk for a minute? Please, I've been wanting to reach out, but I didn't think you'd respond." I looked at him, this man who'd once been my entire world, who I'd built dreams with and trusted completely, and I said, "There's nothing to talk about, Marcus. That was a lifetime ago. I've moved on. You should too." He looked hurt, like he'd expected some different reaction, like maybe he thought enough time had passed that we could be friendly or civil or whatever fantasy he'd built in his head. But I wasn't interested in giving him closure or absolution or anything else he thought he deserved. He said, "I know I messed up. I think about it every day, about what I lost, about how stupid I was, and I just want you to know that I'm sorry. Truly sorry, and I hope you can forgive me someday." I set my plate down, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "I forgave you a long time ago, Marcus. Not for you, but for me. Because holding on to that anger was only hurting me. But forgiveness doesn't mean I forget. And it definitely doesn't mean I want you in my life in any capacity." His face fell, and he said, "I'm in therapy now. I've been working on myself, trying to understand why I did what I did, why I sabotaged the best thing I ever had, and I just wanted you to know that." I almost laughed, because the audacity of him thinking I cared about his personal growth journey, like his therapy sessions had anything to do with me. Like I was supposed to be proud of him for doing the bare minimum work he should have done before he destroyed our marriage. I said, "That's good, Marcus. I'm glad you're working on yourself, genuinely, but that's for you and whoever you're with now, not for me. I don't need updates on your healing process. I did my own healing without you." Someone else walked into the kitchen then, and the conversation ended, and I was grateful for the interruption because I'd said everything I needed to say, and staying in that space with him any longer felt like giving him more of my energy than he deserved. I left the repast early, didn't say goodbye to him, didn't look back, just got in my car with James, who'd come with me for support, and I told him about the conversation, and he squeezed my hand and said, "I'm proud of you for standing your ground." That interaction confirmed what I already knew, that I'd completely moved on, that Marcus no longer had any power over me, that I could see him and feel nothing because he was truly in my past, not just physically but emotionally too. Some people hold on to their hurt forever, let it define them, let it poison every future relationship, and I get that. I understand how betrayal can make you bitter and suspicious and closed off. But I chose differently. I chose to take the lesson without carrying the pain, chose to protect my peace without building walls so high that no one could ever get close again, chose to believe that what Marcus did was about him, not about the entire male population. That choice saved me, saved my ability to love again, saved me from becoming the kind of person who's so damaged by the past that they sabotage their own future, and I'm grateful I had the awareness to make that choice. James and I got engaged 6 months after that funeral. He proposed during a trip to Santorini, on a cliffside at sunset, the most beautiful moment of my life. And when I said yes, I wasn't thinking about Marcus or my first marriage or any of the pain I'd been through. I was fully present, fully grateful, fully ready to start this new chapter with someone who'd proven himself worthy of my trust, and that's how I knew I'd healed completely, because my past wasn't interfering with my present anymore. Planning my second wedding was completely different from planning my first. Back then I'd been so focused on the details, the perfect dress and flowers and venue, making sure everything looked picture perfect for everyone else. This time I didn't care about any of that. We kept it small, just close family and friends, at a vineyard outside the city, simple and intimate, and focused on what actually mattered, the commitment we were making to each other. My dad walked me down the aisle, and he leaned in right before we got to James and whispered, "This one's different. I can see it in the way he looks at you, like you're the only person in the room," and I knew he was right. Marcus had never looked at me like that. Even in our best moments, there was always something distracted about him, something looking for the next thing, the next thrill, the next validation. But James looks at me like I'm enough, like I'm everything. We said our vows and I cried, not sad tears, but happy ones, grateful tears, because I'd gone through hell to get to this moment, and it made me appreciate it so much more than I would have if I'd never known heartbreak. I thought about Marcus briefly during the reception, wondered if he'd heard I was getting remarried, wondered if it bothered him, and then I let the thought go because it didn't matter. He was a ghost I'd stopped being haunted by. Tasha gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying. She talked about watching me go through the worst time of my life and come out stronger, talked about how James had restored her faith that good men still existed, talked about how this was the wedding I deserved. Not the first one. My mom cried through the whole ceremony, partly because she was happy, but partly because she felt guilty. She told me later that she'd suspected Marcus was cheating toward the end, but didn't say anything because she didn't want to plant seeds of doubt if she was wrong. I told her I didn't blame her, that it wasn't her job to expose him, that even if she had said something I probably wouldn't have believed her until I saw it with my own eyes, and we hugged and I felt that weight lift off her shoulders. James's family embraced me completely. No judgment about my divorce, no weird questions about what happened, just love and acceptance and welcoming me into their fold like I'd always belonged there. His mother pulled me aside at the reception and said, "I can see how much you've been through. I can see it in your eyes, but I can also see how strong you are. And I'm so grateful my son found someone who knows what real love looks like because she knows what it doesn't look like." That hit me harder than I expected, and I cried again, because she was right. Surviving Marcus made me appreciate James in ways I never could have otherwise, made me recognize healthy love, because I'd experienced toxic love. We honeymooned in Italy, 2 weeks of wine and pasta and exploring ancient cities, and it was the first time in years I felt completely at peace. No anxiety about where James was or who he was texting, just pure trust and joy. I posted a few photos from the trip and Marcus liked one of them, which felt pathetic honestly. Like, what was he doing lurking on my page? What did he hope to gain from watching me live my best life without him? I blocked him after that. Should have done it years ago honestly, but I'd left him unblocked out of some misplaced sense of being the bigger person, and then I realized the bigger person wouldn't care either way. The bigger person would just remove access and move on. James never asked me to block Marcus, never made me feel like he was threatened or insecure, but I did it for myself, for my own peace, because I didn't need that connection anymore. Didn't need to know what Marcus was up to or if he was watching my life unfold. We bought a house a year after the wedding, nothing huge, but perfect for us, and I made sure my name was on the deed, made sure I had my own money in my own accounts, made sure I'd learned the financial lessons my first marriage had taught me. Not because I didn't trust James, but because I'd learned that you can love someone and still protect yourself, that being smart about money and independence isn't a lack of faith in your partner, it's self-preservation. James understood that, never questioned why I wanted separate accounts in addition to our joint one, never made me feel paranoid for wanting to maintain some financial autonomy, and that understanding made me trust him even more. We started talking about kids, something I'd wanted with Marcus, but looking back, I'm so grateful that never happened. Can you imagine being tied to him forever through a child, having to co-parent with someone who'd betrayed me so completely? With James, the idea of having kids felt exciting instead of terrifying, felt like something I actually wanted instead of something I was supposed to want, and we started trying, no pressure, just seeing what happened. I got pregnant 6 months later, and when I saw those 2 lines on the test, I felt pure joy, no fear, no anxiety about whether James would step up or disappear or turn into someone I didn't recognize. Just excitement about building a family with someone I trusted completely. We found out we were having a girl, and I cried, happy tears mixed with relief that I'd have a daughter to teach about self-worth and boundaries and never accepting less than she deserves, lessons I'd learned the hard way. Marcus sent a congratulations message somehow, must have heard through mutual friends, and I deleted it without reading the whole thing because I didn't need his well wishes, didn't need him inserting himself into my happiness, didn't need anything from him ever again. My daughter was born on a Tuesday in March, 8 pounds 3 ounces, perfect in every way, and when James held her for the first time and started crying, I knew I'd made the right choice, knew this was the life I was supposed to have. I named her Zara, strong and beautiful and fierce, everything I hoped she'd be, and looking at her tiny face, I made a promise that I'd raise her to never tolerate what I'd tolerated, to walk away the first time someone disrespects her, to know her worth before anyone tries to convince her she's worthless. Being a mother changed me in ways I didn't expect, made me even more grateful I'd left Marcus, because watching Zara grow up in a home full of love and respect and honesty, that's the legacy I want to leave her, not dysfunction disguised as commitment. She's 3 now, smart and funny and way too observant for her own good, and sometimes when I watch her play I think about the alternate timeline where I stayed with Marcus, where she would have grown up watching her father disrespect her mother, learning that love looks like lies and betrayal. I saved her from that by saving myself, and that makes every hard moment worth it, every tear I cried, every night I spent angry and hurt and questioning everything. It was all worth it to get here. James is an incredible father, present and patient, and so in love with our daughter it makes my heart ache in the best way, and Zara adores him, follows him around the house, wants him to read her bedtime stories every night. This is what partnership looks like, what real love looks like, what marriage is supposed to be when both people are committed and honest and showing up fully, and I'm so grateful I didn't settle for less. Didn't accept Marcus's version of love just because I was afraid of starting over. I run into people sometimes who knew us as a couple, Marcus and me, and they always ask what happened, why we split, and I keep it simple. Say, he wasn't who I thought he was, I'm better off now, and leave it at that. Some people push, want the juicy details, the drama, and I shut it down because my story isn't entertainment, it's my life, and I don't owe anyone an explanation beyond what I'm comfortable sharing. The people who matter, the ones who actually care about me, they know what happened, they were there through it, they watched me rebuild from scratch, and their support means everything. I heard through the grapevine that Marcus got married again, some woman he met at work, and my first thought was, I hope she knows what she's getting into, followed immediately by, that's not my problem anymore. Part of me wanted to warn her, wanted to send an anonymous message telling her to watch out, but I didn't because that's not my responsibility. She'll figure it out on her own, or maybe he's actually changed. Stranger things have happened. But probably not, because people who cheat usually don't change. They just get better at hiding it, and whoever she is, she'll learn that lesson the same way I did. The hard way. I don't wish him ill. Don't hope his life falls apart. Don't spend any energy thinking about his karma or justice or any of that. I'm just indifferent, and that indifference is the ultimate freedom. Zara asks sometimes about my first wedding. She's seen photos at my mom's house. Pictures from before Marcus and I split, and I tell her the truth in age-appropriate ways. That mommy was married before daddy, that it didn't work out. That sometimes people make mistakes and we have to be brave enough to start over. She accepts it easily the way kids do, doesn't judge, doesn't ask complicated questions, just says, "Okay, mommy," and goes back to playing. And I'm grateful she's growing up in a world where divorce isn't shameful. It's just a fact of life sometimes. I'm 36 now, happy, healthy, living a life I'm proud of, and when I think about that day in the hotel room, that moment when my world imploded, I don't feel pain anymore, I feel gratitude. Gratitude that I found out when I did. Gratitude that I had the strength to leave. Gratitude that I didn't waste more years on someone who didn't value me. Gratitude for every single thing that led me here. This is my truth, my story, my journey from betrayal to healing to happiness, and if sharing it helps even one person find the courage to walk away from something that's hurting them, then every painful moment was worth it. Marcus is still out there somewhere, still living his life, still dealing with whatever demons made him the way he is, and I genuinely hope he's found peace, hope he's worked through his issues, hope he's treating people better. But that's his journey now, not mine. I'm on my own path with my husband and my daughter and a future full of possibilities, and Marcus is just a chapter in my history, not the whole book. I'm writing new chapters now, better ones, happier ones, and they don't include him at all, and that's exactly how it should be. I never told Zara the full story about Marcus. Figured I'd save that conversation for when she's older, when she can understand the complexity of adult relationships and the importance of knowing when to walk away from something toxic. But she asked me one day when she was about 5, completely out of nowhere while we were making pancakes, "Mommy, why didn't you stay married to the man in Grandma's pictures?" And I realized I couldn't keep putting off this conversation. I sat her down, got on her level, and said sometimes grown-ups make promises to each other that they can't keep, and when that happens we have to make hard choices about what's best for us, and I chose to leave so I could find real love with your daddy. She nodded like she understood even though I knew she probably didn't fully, and then she said, "Did he hurt you?" And my heart broke a little because she was already learning that love can hurt, that people can disappoint you. I said, "Yes, baby. He hurt my feelings, but I'm okay now, and I learned a lot, and I'm happy, and that's what matters." And she hugged me tight and said, "I'm glad you found Daddy," and I held her and thought about how right she was. James walked in during that moment, saw us hugging, asked what was going on, and when I told him later he said, "You handled that perfectly. She needs to know that leaving is always an option, that she should never feel trapped." And I loved him even more for understanding. We had another baby 2 years after Zara, a boy this time, named him Miles, and watching James with 2 kids confirmed everything I already knew, that he was the partner I'd always deserved, the father my children needed. The man Marcus had pretended to be but never actually was. Life got busier with 2 kids, my career kept growing, James's architecture firm landed bigger projects. We were building this beautiful, chaotic life together. And sometimes I'd stop in the middle of a regular Tuesday and just feel overwhelmed with gratitude. Gratitude that I'd walked away from comfortable misery, that I'd chosen myself even when it was terrifying, that I'd been brave enough to believe I deserved better, and then actually went out and found it. I stopped thinking about Marcus almost entirely except for moments like this when I'm reflecting on how far I've come, and even then it's not about him specifically, it's about who I was then versus who I am now. The woman who stayed married to Marcus, who ignored her instincts, who made herself small to accommodate his ego, she's gone, replaced by someone who knows her worth and won't compromise it for anyone. I mentor younger women now through a program at work, and I always tell them the same thing. Don't ignore red flags hoping they'll go away. Don't stay in situations that make you question your sanity. Don't let anyone convince you that your standards are too high. One of my ments came to me crying last year, found out her boyfriend was cheating, didn't know what to do, and I told her my story. Not all the details, but enough, and I watched her face change as she realized she wasn't alone. She left him that week, thanked me for giving her the courage, and 6 months later she's thriving, dating someone new who treats her right, and seeing her transformation reminded me why sharing our stories matters. We're not supposed to suffer in silence. We're supposed to talk about it, support each other, lift each other up when someone tries to tear us down, and that's what women do when we're at our best. We protect each other. Shanice and I still talk occasionally. She's doing well, still bartending, but also started her own consulting business teaching bars and restaurants about customer service, and she credits that message she sent me as a turning point in her life too. She said watching me leave Marcus and rebuild my life inspired her to stop accepting mediocrity in her own relationships, to demand better, and she's engaged now to someone who worships the ground she walks on, and I'm so happy for her. We met up for brunch last year, first time seeing each other in person since all of this started, and we hugged like old friends even though we'd really only connected through that one devastating message. She said, "I think about that night at the bar all the time. Wonder if I should have minded my business. But then I see her life now and I know I did the right thing." And I told her she absolutely did, that she saved me from wasting more years on a lie. We laughed about how dramatic it all was, the hotel confrontation, the divorce, all of it. Not because it was funny at the time, but because we'd both come so far since then that we could look back without pain. That's healing, real healing, when you can talk about the worst moments of your life without falling apart, when you can acknowledge the pain without letting it consume you, when you can find meaning in the mess. My parents are older now, mellowed out, and my mom told me recently that watching me go through that divorce and come out stronger changed her perspective on a lot of things, made her reevaluate her own marriage, her own compromises. She didn't leave my dad or anything dramatic like that, but she started speaking up more, stopped accepting things that bothered her, set boundaries she'd never set before, and their relationship actually got better because of it. She said, "You taught me that it's never too late to demand respect, even from someone you've been with for 40 years, and I was proud that my pain had somehow helped her find her voice too." My dad's always been a man of few words, but he pulled me aside at Miles's first birthday party and said, "I'm sorry I didn't see what Marcus was doing. I should have protected you better," and I told him it wasn't his job to protect me from my own husband. That's some lessons we have to learn ourselves. He hugged me tight and said, "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for," and coming from my dad, who rarely gives compliments, that meant everything. James's parents treat me like I'm their biological daughter, never make me feel like the second wife or the divorced one, just embrace me fully, and James's mom told me once that I'm the best thing that ever happened to her son. She said, "He was drifting before you, successful but empty, and you brought him back to life." And I thought about how we'd saved each other in different ways, how sometimes broken people can heal together instead of breaking each other further. We take family trips now, all four of us, and I make sure to document everything, not for social media but for us, so my kids can look back and see what a happy family looks like, what love is supposed to feel like. Zara's 8 now and already so perceptive. She watches how James treats me, how he asks my opinion on things, how he shares responsibilities without being asked, and I know she's internalizing what a good partner looks like. Miles is still young, only 5, but he's already learning respect by watching his father, learning that men can be gentle and present and emotionally available, and that makes me so hopeful for the kind of man he'll become. I think about the kids I might have had with Marcus, and I feel nothing but relief that it never happened, that I don't have to co-parent with him, don't have to explain to children why their father lives somewhere else, don't have to pretend he's a good man when he's not. My kids have stability and honesty and 2 parents who genuinely love each other, and that's worth more than anything Marcus could have ever given me, more than the house we were saving for or the life we'd planned. I ran into one of Marcus's friends at a charity gala last year, someone we'd been close with during the marriage, and he pulled me aside looking uncomfortable and said, "I need to apologize. I knew what Marcus was doing and I didn't say anything." I appreciated the honesty but told him I didn't blame him, that men protect each other, and that's a whole other issue. But I'd moved on and he should too, and he looked relieved like he'd been carrying that guilt for years. He told me Marcus asks about me sometimes, wants to know if I'm happy, if I ever talk about him, and I said, "Tell him I am happy and I don't talk about him at all," and walked away before he could say anything else. I don't owe Marcus updates on my life, don't owe him the satisfaction of knowing he still crosses my mind occasionally, Don't owe him anything except maybe a thank you for showing me exactly what I didn't want. Thank you, Marcus, for lying to my face for 6 months because it taught me to trust my intuition. Thank you for cheating because it forced me to find my spine. Thank you for being a terrible husband because it made me appreciate a good one. That's the only gratitude he'll ever get from me, the acknowledgement that his betrayal inadvertently led me to something better, and even that feels like more than he deserves. James knows all of this, knows about Marcus, knows about the hotel room, knows about the divorce and the healing and all of it, and he's never once made me feel like damaged goods or like my past was too much baggage. He says my past made me who I am, and he loves who I am, so he's grateful for everything that led me to him, even the painful parts, and that kind of acceptance is what real love looks like. We celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary last month, took a trip to Greece without the kids, just us reconnecting and remembering why we chose each other, and it was perfect, easy, effortless in the way love should be. I thought about my 5-year anniversary with Marcus, how we'd gone through the motions, nice dinner, generic gifts, both of us pretending everything was fine when it was already falling apart. And I realized I'd been living a lie for so long I'd forgotten what truth felt like. With James, everything is truth, transparent and honest and sometimes messy, but always real. And I'll take real over perfect any day of the week because perfect is usually just a performance. We renewed our vows on that trip, nothing official, just the two of us on a beach at sunset saying the things we'd learned over a decade together, promising to keep choosing each other even when it's hard. I cried happy tears, the kind that come from a place of pure contentment, and James wiped them away and said, "This is what you deserve. This is what it's always supposed to feel like," and he was right. I'm 41 now, gray hair's starting to show, wrinkles around my eyes from smiling so much, body different after 2 kids, and I've never felt more beautiful because I'm loved for who I am, not who someone wants me to be. Marcus would have made comments by now, would have suggested I hit the gym more or dress younger or do something about the gray, but James tells me I'm aging like fine wine and actually means it, looks at me like I'm still the most beautiful woman in the world. That's the difference between a man who values you and a man who's keeping his options open. One makes you feel secure and cherished. The other makes you feel like you're constantly auditioning for a role you already have. I look at young women now, the ones in their 20s getting married, and I want to shake them and say, make sure he's worthy. Make sure you're not ignoring red flags. Make sure you love yourself enough to leave if he shows you he's not the one. But I know they have to learn their own lessons. Some of them will get lucky and marry good men on the first try. Some of them will go through what I went through. And all I can do is be there when they need someone who understands, someone who's been in the fire and came out the other side. My story isn't unique. Thousands of women go through this every day, but it's mine, and I own every part of it, the pain and the healing and the triumph, because it made me who I am. I'm a wife, a mother, a successful professional, a mentor, a friend, a survivor, and none of that would be true if I'd stayed, if I'd accepted Marcus's version of love, if I'd convinced myself that good enough was actually good enough. It wasn't then, and it won't ever be. I deserve great love, and so does everyone else, and settling for less is just slow suicide disguised as compromise. Marcus is 50 now, I know, because we share a birthday month and sometimes mutual acquaintances post about him, and he looks tired, like life has been harder than he expected, and maybe it has been. Maybe karma's real and he's facing consequences I'll never know about, or maybe he's happy and I just can't imagine how. Either way, it doesn't matter because his life stopped being my concern the day I walked out of that hotel room. I've built something beautiful from the ashes of that marriage, something real and lasting and full of joy, and that's the best revenge. Not that I'm trying to get revenge, but if I was, living well would absolutely be it. My kids will grow up knowing their mom is strong, knowing she didn't stay in something that hurt her just because leaving was scary, knowing that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is start over. And when Zara gets older and I tell her the full story, when I explain about Marcus and the cheating and the divorce, I'll also tell her about the courage it took to leave, the healing that came after, the love I found because I refused to settle. I'll tell her that her dad is proof that good men exist, that loyalty isn't a fantasy, That respect is the bare minimum, and she should never accept less, and I'll hope she listens better than I did at her age. But even if she doesn't, even if she has to learn these lessons the hard way like I did, I'll be there, ready to catch her when she falls, ready to remind her that she's strong enough to survive anything, ready to show her what rebuilding looks like. Because that's what we do, those of us who've been through the fire, we reach back and pull others through. We share our stories so they don't feel alone. We prove that survival is possible and happiness is waiting on the other side. This is my story. From betrayal to divorce to healing to finding real love, and I'm sharing it because somewhere out there is a woman sitting on her couch reading a message from a stranger, and she needs to know she's not alone, she's not crazy, and she's strong enough to walk away. She's strong enough to choose herself, to demand better, to believe she deserves more than lies and betrayal, and whatever happens next, she'll survive it, just like I did. That's my truth. That's my journey, and I'm finally at a place where I can tell it without breaking, where Marcus is just a plot point instead of the main character, where my life is about what I built after him, not what he destroyed. I'm free, I'm happy, I'm loved, I'm enough, and that's how this story ends, not with him begging for me back, but with me not caring either way, living my best life, loving my family, and never looking back. That's the power of walking away. That's the beauty of choosing yourself. That's what happens when you refuse to accept less than you deserve. And to everyone who's still in it, still deciding, still scared, I'm telling you what I wish someone had told me: leave. Don't wait for it to get better. Don't hope he'll change. Don't waste another day on someone who's already shown you who they are. Believe them the first time. Walk away with your head high and trust that something better is waiting, because it is. I'm proof of that, and you will be too. I never imagined I'd be standing here 15 years later, looking back at that version of myself in that hotel hallway and feeling anything other than pain. But here I am, grateful for every single moment that led me away from Marcus and toward the life I have now. Zara's 13 now, in that weird middle school phase where everything is dramatic and nothing makes sense, and she came to me last week asking about first loves and heartbreak and how you know if someone's right for you. I sat her down and told her the full story, age-appropriate but honest, about Marcus and the cheating and the divorce, and she listened with these wide eyes like she couldn't believe her mom had been through something so messy. She asked, "Did you love him?" And I said I loved who I thought he was, but that person didn't exist. I was in love with a fantasy, and once I saw the real him, I couldn't unsee it. She wanted to know if it hurt when I found out, if I cried, if I was angry, and I told her yes to all of it, that heartbreak is supposed to hurt. That's how you know it mattered. But the hurt doesn't last forever if you don't let it. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. How did you know Daddy was different? And I smiled because that answer was easy. He never made me question if I was enough, never made me feel crazy for having standards, never gave me a reason to doubt him. She nodded like she was taking mental notes and said, "I'm glad you left him, because if you hadn't, you wouldn't have had me and Miles." And she was right. Every terrible thing that happened led me to my kids, and that makes it all worth it. Miles is 10 now, playing basketball and getting straight A's and turning into this kind, thoughtful young man who opens doors and says please and thank you without being reminded. And I know that's because of James. Because he's watching his father treat people with respect and dignity. James's firm is thriving. He's become one of the most sought-after architects in Atlanta, and I'm the VP at my company now. We're both successful, but more importantly, we're happy. Genuinely happy in a way that doesn't feel fragile or temporary. We bought a bigger house last year. Nothing ostentatious, but comfortable, with enough space for the kids to grow and for us to host family dinners and make memories that'll last long after we're gone. I was unpacking boxes in the new house when I found an old photo album from my first wedding. Must have been buried in storage for years, and I sat there on the floor looking at pictures of Marcus and me smiling like we had it all figured out. James walked in and saw me with the album and said, "You okay?" And I said, "Yeah, just weird seeing these, feeling like I'm looking at a stranger." And he sat down next to me, put his arm around me, didn't make it weird or jealous, just let me process. I threw the album away after that, didn't need it, didn't want my kids finding it someday and asking questions, Didn't want any physical reminders of that version of my life taking up space in this new one. Marcus reached out again about 3 years ago, sent a long email talking about how he'd been in therapy for years, how he'd finally understood the depth of what he'd done, how he'd become a better person, and wanted me to know that. I read it once, felt nothing, deleted it, and moved on with my day because his personal growth journey had nothing to do with me. I wasn't a character in his redemption arc. I was just the woman he'd betrayed who'd moved on completely. His wife reached out too. The one he married after me found me on LinkedIn and sent a message saying, "I need to know, did he cheat on you?" And I knew immediately what that meant. Knew he'd done it again. Knew leopards don't change their spots. I responded honestly. Told her yes he did. Told her for 6 months. Told her I found him in a hotel room with another woman. And she thanked me and said she'd suspected but needed confirmation. And I felt bad for her but also relieved I wasn't her anymore. She left him apparently, heard through mutual friends that she'd filed for divorce and took him for everything, and part of me wanted to reach out and say, "Welcome to the club," but I didn't because that wasn't my place. She was on her own journey now. It's funny how some men never learn, how they repeat the same patterns expecting different results, how they destroy good women over and over because they're too broken to appreciate what they have. Marcus is alone now from what I hear, pushing 55, burned too many bridges, reputation too damaged, living in some apartment downtown, and I don't feel sorry for him because he made his choices and now he's living with them. I ran into his mother at a grocery store 2 years ago, hadn't seen her since the divorce, and she looked at me with these sad eyes and said, "I owe you an apology. I should have believed you. I should have held my son accountable." I told her it was okay, that I'd forgiven everyone involved a long time ago, and she started crying right there in the produce section, saying Marcus had ruined his life, that she didn't even recognize him anymore, that she wished he'd been the man I deserved. It was awkward and uncomfortable, and I felt bad for her because she was carrying guilt that wasn't hers to carry. Her son's choices weren't her fault, but I understood why she felt responsible. Mothers always do. I gave her my number and told her to call if she ever needed to talk, not because I wanted to be friends, but because she was a good woman who'd been lied to just like I had, and she deserved compassion even if her son didn't. She called once, about 6 months later, just to check in, to tell me she'd heard I had kids now and was happy, and she said, "I'm glad you found what you were looking for. I'm glad you didn't let what my son did make you bitter." I told her bitterness was a choice and I'd chosen differently, chosen to take the lesson and leave the pain, and she said, "I wish more women had your strength," and we said goodbye and haven't spoken since. Shanice and I still text on the anniversary of that message every year. It's become this weird tradition. We send each other updates on our lives and remind each other how far we've come since that night at the W. She has 2 kids now, owns 3 bars in Atlanta, completely transformed her life, and she still says that decision to message me changed everything for her, made her realize the power of women looking out for each other. We talk about writing a book together sometimes, about our experience, about betrayal and recovery and the importance of sisterhood, but we haven't done it yet. Maybe someday when the story feels fully complete. Tasha's still my best friend, still the first person I call with good news or bad, still the one who knows all my secrets and loves me anyway, and she's watching me raise my kids thinking that's the woman I helped put back together. She got married 5 years ago to an amazing man who treats her like gold, and at her wedding she gave a speech thanking me for showing her what standards look like, for refusing to settle, for proving that good men exist if you're patient enough to wait for them. My career hit heights I never imagined, speaking at conferences now, mentoring dozens of young women, writing articles about leadership and resilience, and people always ask what made me so strong, where that drive comes from. I tell them it comes from being broken and choosing to rebuild better, from hitting rock bottom and deciding the only way out was up, from learning that your worst moments can become your greatest teachers if you let them. James and I still go on date nights every week, non-negotiable, just us reconnecting and remembering why we chose each other, and people always comment on how in love we still are after 15 years. The secret isn't that we never fight or that everything's perfect. It's that we choose each other every single day. We communicate instead of hiding. We work through problems instead of running from them. We do the work that Marcus never wanted to do. I look at my life now, my beautiful family, my successful career, my genuine happiness, and I think about that woman standing outside room 804 with her heart pounding, terrified of what she'd find, but brave enough to knock anyway. I want to go back and hug her, tell her it's going to hurt worse than she can imagine, but she's going to survive. Tell her that breaking is sometimes the only way to break through. Tell her that her best life is waiting on the other side of this nightmare. But I can't go back, none of us can. All we can do is move forward and hope we make better choices than we did before. Hope we learn from our mistakes. Hope we become the people we needed when we were struggling. I'm that person now for other women, because I'm living proof. Zara wants to study psychology in college, says she wants to help people heal from trauma, and I know that's because she's watched me do that work on myself, watched me transform pain into purpose, and I'm so proud of the woman she's becoming. Miles wants to be an architect like his dad, already drawing buildings and structures, already showing that same attention to detail and passion for creating beautiful things, and watching him idolize James makes my heart full. My kids will never know what it's like to have a father who's checked out, who's lying, who's building a secret life. They'll never question if they're loved or valued or important, and that's the greatest gift I could give them. James's parents are aging now, slower and more fragile, and they tell us all the time how grateful they are that we found each other, how we restored their faith that real love exists, and their blessing means more to me than they'll ever know. My parents are proud of me in ways they never were during my first marriage. They can see the difference, can see that I'm not just surviving anymore, but thriving. And my dad told me recently, this is the daughter I always knew you could be. I volunteer at a domestic violence shelter now, not because Marcus was physically abusive, but because betrayal is its own kind of violence, and I want women to know there are different kinds of abuse, different ways men can destroy you. I sit with women who've just left, who are terrified and broken and doubting their decision, and I tell them about Marcus, about the hotel room, about rebuilding from nothing, and I watch hope flicker in their eyes. They need to know it's possible, need to see someone who's made it to the other side, need proof that leaving doesn't mean your life is over, it means your real life is finally beginning. I'm 53 now, more than half my life has been lived since Marcus. More years without him than with him, and that feels significant somehow, like I've finally outrun that version of myself who thought she needed him. I don't need anyone, I choose James every day, but I don't need him to survive, don't need him to validate my worth, don't need him to complete me because I'm already whole on my own. That's what Marcus never understood, that I was never incomplete. I was just loyal to the wrong person, and once I redirected that loyalty towards someone worthy, everything changed. We're planning a big trip for our 20th anniversary, taking the whole family to Africa, safari and beaches and adventures, making memories that'll last forever, and I'm so excited to experience it with people who love me authentically. Marcus is still alone from what I hear, still struggling, still repeating patterns, and I feel nothing about that, not satisfaction, not pity, just nothing, and that nothingness is freedom. I write sometimes, journal entries about my journey, thoughts about healing, lessons I've learned, and maybe someday I'll publish them, share them with the world, let other women know they're not alone. But even if I don't, even if these words stay private, they've served their purpose. They've helped me process, helped me heal, helped me understand that my story isn't defined by what Marcus did, but by how I responded. I responded with courage, with dignity, with a refusal to accept less than I deserved, and that response changed everything, not just for me, but for my kids, for the women I mentor, for everyone watching and learning from my example. This is what surviving looks like. This is what thriving looks like. This is what happens when you choose yourself even when it's terrifying, when you walk away from comfortable misery toward uncertain possibility. The possibility became reality, became this beautiful, messy, imperfect, perfect life I'm living now, and I wouldn't trade it for anything, not even a version where Marcus never cheated. Because that version doesn't include Zara and Miles and James and everything I've become. I'm grateful, genuinely grateful, for every moment of pain that led me here, for every tear I cried, for every night I thought I wouldn't survive, because I did survive, and I'm better for it. That's my final word on Marcus, on betrayal, on divorce, on healing. I survived and I thrived, and I'm living proof that your worst day doesn't have to define you. It can refine you instead, make you stronger, wiser, more compassionate. And to anyone reading this who's standing outside their own room 804, heart pounding, terrified of what they'll find, I'm telling you to knock, to face the truth, to choose yourself, because your best life is waiting on the other side of that door. Trust me, I've been there, I've lived it, and I'm here to tell you it's worth it. Every painful moment is worth it, because freedom is worth it, peace is worth it, real love is worth it. Walk away from the lie and toward your truth, and watch how quickly your life transforms when you stop accepting crumbs and start demanding the whole damn feast. That's my story, that's my truth, that's my life 15 years after the worst day became the catalyst for the best years, and I'm proud of every choice I made, every boundary I set, every moment I chose myself. Marcus is a memory now, not even a painful one, just a fact of my history, and I'm focused on my present, on my future, on the legacy I'm building for my kids, and the example I'm setting for every woman watching. This is what winning looks like, not revenge, not karma, not him suffering, but me living fully, loving deeply, and never looking back. That's the end of this story. Not because there's nothing left to say, but because I've said everything that matters, and now it's time to close this chapter and focus on the one still being written. I never expected to hear his name again after all these years, but life has a way of bringing things full circle when you least expect it, and Marcus's name came up in the most unexpected way possible about 6 months ago. Zara came home from college for winter break. She's 18 now, studying psychology at Spelman, brilliant and compassionate, and everything I hoped she'd be. And she mentioned casually over dinner that her professor had assigned a case study about infidelity and its long-term effects. She said, "We had to interview someone who'd been through it, and I thought about asking you, but I didn't want to bring up bad memories." And I told her I would have been happy to help, that those memories don't have power over me anymore. James looked at me across the table with that knowing smile. The one that says he's proud of how far I've come, and Miles, who's 15 now and towers over all of us, asked, "Mom, do you ever regret not giving him a second chance?" The question caught me off guard, not because it hurt, but because it was so far from anything I'd ever considered, and I said, not even for a second. Giving him a second chance would have meant disrespecting myself, and I'll never regret choosing my own dignity. Zara started her interview project and came back with statistics that shocked even me. She said, "Did you know that people who cheat once are 3 times more likely to cheat again in future relationships?" And I thought about Marcus's second wife, about the pattern he couldn't break. She said her professor talked about how betrayal trauma affects people long-term, how it changes brain chemistry, how it can make future relationships difficult, and I realized how lucky I was that I'd done the work, that I'd healed properly instead of carrying that damage forward. I told her the key is not letting what someone else did make you suspicious of everyone, not punishing new people for old crimes, and she wrote that down like it was profound, but to me it was just survival. Just the choice I'd made to not let Marcus's betrayal poison my future. James has been talking about retirement lately. He's 60 now and wants to slow down, spend more time with grandkids when they come, travel more, just enjoy life, and I'm right there with him, ready for the next chapter. We talk sometimes about moving, maybe to the coast, somewhere quiet where we can watch the ocean and reflect on everything we've built together, and the fact that we're planning a future together after 20 years still amazes me. I think about how I couldn't even plan next week with Marcus, because I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop, always sensing something was wrong but not trusting myself enough to investigate, and that's no way to live. Living with James is easy, not because we don't have problems, but because we solve them together, because there's no hidden agendas or secret lives, just 2 people committed to making it work every single day. I got a message on LinkedIn last month from a woman I didn't know. She said, "I hope this isn't weird, but I'm going through a divorce because of infidelity and someone told me your story. Would you be willing to talk?" And I said yes immediately. We met for coffee and she cried telling me about finding texts on her husband's phone, about the lies he'd told, about how she felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. And I held her hand and said, "You're not stupid. He was intentionally hiding it. That's what they do. She asked how long it took me to trust again, and I was honest. I said years, but it's possible. I'm living proof, and she looked at me like I was giving her permission to hope, like my existence meant she could survive this too. I gave her my number and told her to call anytime, day or night, if she needed someone who understood, and she's called a few times since then, each time sounding a little stronger, a little more certain she made the right choice. That's my purpose now, being that lifeline for women who are where I was, reminding them they're not alone, showing them what life looks like on the other side of betrayal, and it feels good, meaningful in a way my career success never quite did. Marcus's mother passed away last year. I saw the obituary online, and I thought about calling him to offer condolences, but decided against it. We're not those people to each other anymore. We're nothing to each other. And inserting myself into his grief felt wrong. I sent flowers to the funeral home anonymously instead, because despite everything she'd been kind to me once, before she chose her son's lies over my truth, and she deserved that small gesture of respect. His father died a few years before that, I'd heard, and apparently Marcus fell apart, started drinking heavily, lost his job, spiraled in ways that confirmed what I'd always suspected, that he was running from something inside himself all along. The cheating was never about me, never about not being enough. It was about him trying to fill some void that couldn't be filled with external validation, and understanding that freed me from any remaining traces of self-blame. I see him sometimes in my mind, not as the man who betrayed me, but as a cautionary tale, as proof that you can have everything and throw it away because you're too broken to appreciate it, and I feel sorry for him in an abstract way. Sorry that he never did the work to heal whatever made him that way. Sorry that he's probably still lonely and lost. Sorry that he wasted his chance at real love because he was too busy chasing something he couldn't name. But that sorrow doesn't consume me, doesn't make me want to reach out or check on him. It's just a passing thought, like feeling bad for a stranger you see on the street, compassionate but detached. James and I renewed our vows again last year for our 20th anniversary, this time with the kids there, with our closest friends and family, and it felt like a celebration not just of our marriage but of survival, of choosing right the second time. Zara read a poem she'd written about watching her parents love each other well, about learning what partnership looks like, and I cried because I'd given her that gift, the gift of knowing what healthy love looks like, and that felt like the biggest success of my life. Miles walked me down the aisle with James's father, who's still with us at 82, and having my son beside me in that moment felt full circle, like I was showing him the kind of man to become, the kind of love to build. The ceremony was simple, just us reaffirming promises we'd already kept for 2 decades, but it mattered. It felt important to mark the milestone, to acknowledge that we'd built something real and lasting. I look at my wedding photos from that day, at my gray hair and laugh lines, and the way James looks at me like I'm still the most beautiful thing he's ever seen, and I think about that first wedding, how young I was, how naive. I wouldn't trade wisdom for youth, wouldn't go back even if I could, because everything I've learned, every scar I carry, made me capable of this love, this life, this version of myself I actually like. Marcus is 60 now, maybe older. Time has blurred the specifics, and I genuinely don't know where he is or what he's doing, and the fact that I don't know and don't care feels like the ultimate freedom. There's no curiosity left, no wondering if he thinks about me, no mental space devoted to someone who stopped mattering the moment I closed that hotel room door behind me and chose myself. I'm teaching Zara about boundaries now as she navigates college relationships, telling her to watch how men treat her, to trust her instincts, to never make herself small for someone else's comfort, and she listens because she's seen me live these principles. She's dating someone now, a nice young man who treats her well, and when she brought him home for Thanksgiving, James and I grilled him the way fathers do, and he passed every test, respectful and honest and clearly smitten with our daughter. Watching her be loved well by someone worthy makes my heart so full, knowing she won't have to learn these lessons the hard way, won't have to waste years on someone who doesn't value her, won't have to rebuild herself from scratch like I did. Miles is starting to notice girls now, awkward about it the way 15-year-olds are, and James has already started having conversations about respect and consent and treating women like human beings, not objects or conquests. We're raising good humans, James and I, kids who know what love looks like, who understand that loyalty isn't optional, who will hopefully never inflict the kind of pain Marcus inflicted on me on anyone else. That's legacy, real legacy, not money or property or accomplishments, but raising kids who make the world better, who break cycles instead of repeating them, who choose kindness over cruelty. I volunteer at the shelter still, more now that both kids are older and more independent, and last week a woman asked me if I ever see my ex and what I do when that happens, and I realized I haven't seen Marcus in over a decade. Our paths just don't cross anymore. We live in different worlds, different circles, different realities, and that separation feels appropriate, feels like the natural conclusion to a story that should have ended years before it actually did. I told her I don't see him, and if I did I'd feel nothing, not anger, not pain, not even curiosity, just nothing, and that's how you know you've healed, and she looked skeptical like she couldn't imagine ever getting there. But she will, they all will. Because time and work and choosing yourself over and over creates that distance, that indifference, that freedom from the person who once felt like your whole world. I'm 55 now, been free from Marcus longer than some people have been alive, and when I think about my life I categorize it as before and after, before I found my spine and after I found my strength. The before version feels like someone else's story, like a movie I watched once, and the after version is the only one that matters, the only one I claim, the only one I want to pass down. James and I talk about writing our story someday, not as a revenge tale or an exposé, but as a testament to finding love after devastation, to building something real the second time around, to proving that your first marriage doesn't have to define your capacity for happiness. But we probably won't. We're too busy living to write about living, too focused on the present to dwell on the past, too grateful for what we have to spend time analyzing how we got here. I know how we got here. Courage and boundaries and refusing to settle, choosing myself when it was terrifying, trusting that something better existed even when I couldn't see it yet, and those choices compounded over time into this beautiful life. That's the secret nobody tells you. That leaving is just the first step. The real work is rebuilding yourself into someone who won't accept less than they deserve, someone who knows their worth isn't negotiable, someone who chooses themselves every single day. I choose myself every day now, even while choosing James, even while being a mother and wife and professional. There's a part of me that's just mine, that answers to no one, that remembers what it cost to get here and refuses to ever go back. Marcus can't hurt me anymore, not because I've forgiven him completely, though I have, but because I've built a life so full that there's no room for his ghost, no space for his memory to take root and grow. This is what victory looks like, not dramatic or cinematic, just quiet confidence, deep peace, genuine happiness that doesn't depend on his suffering or my vindication, just exists because I created it. And to anyone out there still hurting, still wondering if you'll survive, still questioning if leaving was the right choice, I'm here to tell you that you will survive. Leaving was the right choice, and your best life is waiting. It's waiting for you to choose it, to believe you deserve it, to do the hard work of healing and rebuilding and becoming someone who won't settle ever again. I did it. Thousands of women before me did it. Thousands after me will do it. And you can too. I promise you can. Because if I could walk away from Marcus and build this life, anyone can. That's my final truth, my final testimony, my final word on a man who once was everything and now is nothing, and I mean that with peace, with gratitude, with the wisdom that only comes from surviving something you weren't sure you could survive. I'm here, I'm whole, I'm happy, and Marcus is wherever he is, and those two things have nothing to do with each other anymore, and that's exactly how it should be. This story ends not with me thinking about him, but with me thinking about my life, my family, my future, my peace, and that shift from him to me is the whole point, is the entire journey, is everything. I'm free, finally and completely free, and that freedom tastes sweeter than anything I ever had with Marcus, sweeter than any apology he could give, sweeter than any revenge I could take, just sweet on its own, uncomplicated and pure. That's the end, the real end. Not because there's nothing left to say, but because I've moved so far beyond that chapter that continuing to talk about it feels like going backward, and I only move forward now. Forward into whatever comes next, with James beside me, with my kids growing into amazing humans, with a life I'm proud of and a story that might help someone else find their way out of the darkness. That's enough, more than enough. Everything I needed it to be, and I'm closing this chapter with gratitude for everything it taught me and excitement for everything still to come. Marcus was a lesson, not a life sentence, and I'm living proof that you can graduate from that school and build something beautiful from what you learned, and that's where this story finally, peacefully, gratefully ends. I thought that was the end, thought I'd said everything that needed saying, but life has this way of adding epilogues when you least expect them, and mine came in the form of a phone call 3 months ago that I never saw coming. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was at my desk reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant buzzed and said, "There's a woman online too asking for you, says it's urgent, won't give her name," and something in my gut told me to take it. I picked up and heard a voice I didn't recognize, young, shaky, scared, and she said, "Is this the woman who was married to Marcus Thompson?" And my blood went cold because nobody's called me that in decades. I'm not that woman anymore. Haven't been for 25 years. I said, "Who is this?" And she took a deep breath and said, "My name is Alana. I'm Marcus's daughter, and I need to talk to you about him." And the world tilted because Marcus has a daughter, which meant he'd built a life after me, had a family. And this girl was calling me for reasons I couldn't begin to understand. She said, "I found your name in some old papers of his, court documents from your divorce, and I tracked you down because I need to understand something and my mom won't talk about it," and I felt that old familiar dread. The sense that Marcus's chaos was about to touch my life again after all these years. I asked how old she was, and she said 23, which meant he'd had her with someone not long after our divorce, probably the woman from the hotel or someone right after, and I wondered why this girl was calling me now, what could possibly be so urgent. She said he's dying, cancer, stage 4, and he's been asking for you, saying things that don't make sense, and I found these letters he never sent, dozens of them, all addressed to you over the years, and I need to know who you were to him. My hands started shaking, and I had to sit down because Marcus is dying. This man who'd once been my entire world, and then my worst nightmare, is actually dying, and he'd been writing me letters he never sent. And his daughter was calling me like I held some key to understanding him. I told her I was his first wife, that we'd divorced over 20 years ago, that I hadn't spoken to him in decades, and she said, "I know, I read the court records, I know he cheated on you, but the letters make it sound like losing you destroyed him. Like everything after was just him trying to fill that void." I almost laughed because of course he'd rewritten history in his head, made me into the one that got away instead of the woman he'd betrayed, turned his own bad choices into some tragic love story where he was the victim of his own stupidity. She asked if I'd be willing to see him, said he doesn't have long, maybe weeks, and he keeps talking about needing to apologize properly, needing to make peace before he goes. And I felt torn between the person I'd become who's supposed to be compassionate and the person who remembers exactly what he did. I told her I needed time to think about it, took her number, hung up, and sat there staring at nothing because I thought I'd closed this chapter, thought Marcus was ancient history, and now he's dying and wanting to see me, and I have no idea what to do. I told James that night, laid out the whole conversation, and he held my hand and said, "What do you want to do? Not what you think you should do. What do you actually want?" And I realized I didn't know. Couldn't separate obligation from desire from curiosity. Part of me wanted to ignore it, let Marcus die without giving him the closure he was seeking, let him sit with his regrets the way I'd sat with my heartbreak, but another part of me, the part that spent decades healing and growing, wondered if seeing him one last time would bring me some kind of peace too. I talked to my therapist about it. Yes, I still see Dr. Williams after all these years, and she said the question isn't whether he deserves your time. It's whether you'll regret not going, whether you have anything left unsaid that needs saying. I thought about it for days, couldn't sleep, kept imagining what it would be like to see him after a quarter century, to look at this man who'd once held my heart and destroyed it, to stand in front of him knowing he's dying and I'm thriving. Zara said, "Mom, you don't owe him anything. If you go, it should be for you, not for him." And Miles said, "Whatever you decide, we support you." And I was so grateful to have raised kids who understood nuance, who knew life isn't black and white. I finally called Alana back and said I'd come, not for Marcus, but for her, this young woman who was losing her father and trying to understand him, who deserved whatever small pieces of truth I could offer. And we arranged to meet at a hospice facility in North Carolina where he'd moved years ago. James offered to come with me, but I said no. This was something I needed to do alone, needed to face without anyone protecting me from whatever emotions might surface, and he understood, kissed my forehead, told me he loved me, trusted me completely. I drove there on a Saturday morning, 3 hours through Georgia and into the mountains, and the whole way I kept rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd react, whether I'd cry or yell, or just feel nothing like I'd felt for so long. The hospice was nice, peaceful, tucked into the woods with big windows and soft lighting, and Alana met me in the lobby looking so much like Marcus it hurt. Same eyes, same smile, and I saw a version of him that never got a chance to hurt me staring back. She hugged me and said, "Thank you for coming. He doesn't know you're here yet. I wanted to talk to you first." And we sat in a quiet room and she told me about her life, about growing up with Marcus as a father, and it was complicated and messy and sad. She said he'd been a good dad when he was present, but he was rarely present, always working or traveling or disappearing for days. And her mother had left him when Alana was 12. Same pattern. He'd cheated again. Couldn't help himself. She said, "I've spent my whole life watching him sabotage every good thing, every relationship, every job, and I've never understood why." And I told her some people are just broken in ways that can't be fixed. That sometimes the why doesn't matter as much as accepting the what. We talked for an hour, and I gave her what I could, pieces of my story. The hotel room, the divorce, the healing, and she cried and said, "I'm so sorry he did that to you. I'm sorry he's done it to everyone." And I told her his choices weren't her burden to carry. Then she asked if I was ready to see him, and I said yes, even though I wasn't sure I was. And she led me down a hallway to a room at the end where Marcus was waiting, dying, probably terrified of whatever comes next. I walked in, and there he was, this man who'd once been strong and handsome and full of life, now shrunken and pale and hooked up to machines, and he looked at me with those same eyes that used to make me feel safe, and I felt absolutely nothing. He tried to sit up when he saw me, said my name like it was a prayer, and I stood there at the foot of his bed just looking at him, taking in what time and choices had done to the man I'd once promised forever to. He said, "You came. I didn't think you would." And I said, "I almost didn't. I'm here for your daughter, not for you." And he nodded like he understood, like he'd expected nothing less. We sat in silence for a minute, and then he started talking, words tumbling out like he'd been holding them for decades. "I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life." I let him talk, didn't interrupt, didn't argue, just let him say whatever he needed to say, and he told me about the years after our divorce, how he'd tried to replicate what we had with other women, how he'd failed every time because he was the problem, not them. He said therapy had helped him understand that he'd been running from intimacy, from real connection, that the cheating was about his own inadequacies, not about anything I did or didn't do, and I wanted to say, "I know that now. Learned it years ago without you," but I stayed quiet. He talked about watching my life from a distance, seeing my success, my new marriage, my kids, and how happy I looked in photos, and he said, "I'm glad you found what you deserved. I'm glad you didn't let what I did destroy you." I finally spoke and said, "It almost did destroy me. I spent years putting myself back together, years learning to trust again, years building a life you have no part of," and he flinched like the words hurt, but he needed to hear them. He asked if I'd forgiven him, and I said, "I forgave you a long time ago, not because you deserved it, but because I needed to, because holding on to anger was only hurting me." And he started crying, these weak, pathetic tears. And I felt sorry for him in a distant way. Sorry that he'd wasted his whole life chasing something he couldn't name. Sorry that he was dying alone except for a daughter who barely knew him. sorry that he'd never figured out how to be happy, but that sorrow didn't crack the walls I'd built. I said, I'm not here to give you absolution, Marcus. I'm here to close a chapter that should have ended decades ago. You don't get to rewrite history on your deathbed. You don't get to make yourself the tragic hero of this story. He nodded and said, I know, I just wanted you to know that I know what I lost, that I've thought about you every day for 25 years, that if I could go back, I'd do everything differently. I stood up to leave and said, but you can't go back, none of us can. All we can do is live with our choices, and I've lived well with mine. I hope you find some peace with yours, and I walked toward the door. He called my name one more time, and I turned around, and he said, are you happy? And I smiled, genuinely smiled, and said deliriously, the kind of happy you and I never even got close to, and I left. I found Alana in the hallway, and she asked how it went, and I said it went exactly how it needed to, and she hugged me tight and thanked me for coming, for giving her father whatever small piece my presence had provided. I gave her my number and told her to call if she needed anything, not as her father's ex-wife, but as a woman who understood complicated family dynamics, who knew what it was like to process someone's death while still being angry at them. I drove home and called James from the car and told him everything, and he said, how do you feel? And I said, free, finally completely free, like I just put down a weight I didn't even know I was still carrying. Marcus died 2 weeks later. Alana called to tell me, said he'd gone peacefully in his sleep, and I felt nothing except sympathy for her, for the young woman losing a father she'd never fully known or understood. I didn't go to the funeral, sent flowers instead, because showing up felt like making it about me when it should be about his daughter processing her grief, and I'd already said everything I needed to say in that hospice room. James asked if I wanted to talk about it, and I said, there's nothing to talk about. A chapter closed. An old wound finally fully healed. I'm good, and I meant it. I was good. Better than good, actually. I told Zara and Miles that the man from my first marriage had died. Didn't give them details they didn't need. Just let them know their mom had handled something difficult and come through it fine, and they hugged me and moved on with their lives. That's what Marcus is now, was even before he died, just a fact of my history, not even a painful one anymore, just something that happened once that led me to where I am, and where I am is exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm 57 now, Marcus is gone, and I'm still here, still loving James, still raising kids, still mentoring women, still living a life so full that there's no room for ghosts or regrets or what-ifs. Alana and I text occasionally. I check in on her, make sure she's doing okay, and she's healing, seeing a therapist, working through her complicated feelings about her father, and I'm proud of her for doing that work young instead of waiting decades like I did. She asked me once if I ever loved her father, and I said I loved who I thought he was, but that person didn't exist. I loved a fantasy, and losing that fantasy hurt, but it also freed me to find something real. She said that helped her understand that she could love her father and still acknowledge his flaws, could grieve him while being angry at him, could hold space for both things at once, and I was glad my story could give her that permission. This is really the end now, not because Marcus died, but because his death didn't change anything for me, didn't bring me closure I didn't already have, didn't make me question any of my choices or feel any lingering attachment. He was a man I knew once who hurt me deeply and taught me exactly what I didn't want, and then he was gone, and I continued being happy, and that's the ultimate proof that I'd healed, that I'd moved on, that I'd built something he could never touch. My life is mine now, completely and totally mine. No ghosts, no unfinished business, no questions left unanswered, just me and James and our kids, and the beautiful ordinary magic of a life well lived. That's how this story actually ends, with Marcus dead and me alive and thriving, with his daughter finding her way and me still offering guidance, with closure that came not from his apology, but from my own journey. I don't think about him anymore unless someone asks. Don't wonder what he'd think of my life now. Don't care if dying with regrets about me made his last days harder. I'm just here, fully present in my own life, grateful for everything that led me here. And to anyone reading this who's still processing their own betrayal, their own Marcus, their own journey from broken to whole, I'm here to tell you that you'll get here too, to this place of genuine indifference, of real peace, of complete freedom. It takes time and work and choosing yourself over and over, but you'll get here, and when you do, you'll look back and be so grateful you left, so proud of who you became, so clear that everything happened exactly as it needed to. That's my truth, my testimony, my promise, and I'm living it every single day, free and happy and so far removed from who I was in that hotel hallway that she feels like a stranger I once knew who needed help I'm now qualified to give. This is victory. This is healing. This is what happens when you survive something that tried to destroy you and you use it as fuel to become indestructible, and I'm grateful for all of it, even the painful parts, especially the painful parts, because they made me who I am. And who I am is enough, more than enough, exactly enough, and that's the lesson Marcus never learned, but I did, and that's why I'm here and he's gone, and that's how this story ends, with me still standing, still loving, still living, and that's everything. I thought seeing Marcus on his deathbed would be the final punctuation mark on that chapter, but closure doesn't work like that. It keeps unfolding in unexpected ways. And the latest unfoldment came in the form of a box that arrived at my office 6 months after his death. Alana had sent it with a note that said he left instructions for these to be given to you after he passed. I debated sending them, but I think he was right that you should have them, and inside were those letters. Decades worth of unsent letters Marcus had written to me over the years. I sat in my office staring at that box for 20 minutes before I could even open it, and when I finally did, I found them organized by year, meticulously dated, some typed, some handwritten, all of them addressed to me but never mailed, never sent. Just written and stored like confessions he couldn't quite bring himself to deliver. I took the box home and told James about it, and he asked if I was going to read them, and I said I didn't know. Wasn't sure I wanted to give Marcus access to my head again after all these years. Wasn't sure what reading his version of our story would do to the piece I'd worked so hard to build. But curiosity won eventually, the way it always does, and one night when James was traveling for work and the kids were busy with their own lives, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my back porch, and opened the first letter dated 3 months after our divorce was finalized. It was angry, bitter, full of blame directed at me for not giving him another chance, for not understanding that everyone makes mistakes, for being too proud to forgive, and I almost stopped reading right there because this was the Marcus I remembered, the one who couldn't take accountability. But I kept going, moved through the years chronologically, and watched his tone shift as time passed and therapy presumably kicked in, watched him move from anger to bargaining to depression to something resembling acceptance, watched him document his own unraveling in real time. There was a letter from the year he lost his second marriage, raw and broken, admitting that he'd cheated again, that he couldn't seem to stop himself, that watching another woman leave him the way I had finally made him understand that he was the problem. Not all these women who kept walking away. There was a letter from the year Alana was born, talking about how terrified he was that he'd mess up this innocent life the way he'd messed up everything else, how he looked at his daughter and saw my face in his mind. Wondered what our kids would have looked like if he hadn't destroyed that possibility. There were letters from random years documenting random moments, seeing me at that restaurant with James, hearing through mutual friends that I'd gotten remarried, finding out I'd had kids, each milestone in my life apparently triggering some kind of crisis in his. Some reminder of what he'd lost. The later letters were different, more contemplative, less about me specifically and more about his own patterns, his own demons, the work he was finally doing in therapy to understand why he'd sabotaged every good thing. And I found myself feeling something I never expected, gratitude that he'd finally figured it out even if it was too late. There was a letter from 5 years ago where he wrote about seeing my daughter's photo on social media, how beautiful she was, how much she looked like me, and he said, "I hope she never meets someone like me. I hope you've taught her to recognize red flags and run. I hope she has standards you had to learn the hard way." That one made me cry, not sad tears, but something more complicated. Acknowledgement that even broken people can want better for the next generation, can recognize their own toxicity and hope it doesn't spread. And I appreciated that glimpse of awareness, even if it came decades late. The final letter was dated a month before he died, written in shaky handwriting that showed his declining health, and it said, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that you were right about everything. That leaving me was the smartest thing you ever did, that I hope these letters help you understand it was never about you." He wrote, "You were perfect. You loved me completely, and I destroyed it because I was broken in ways I didn't understand and refused to acknowledge, and you deserved so much better than what I gave you. I'm glad you found it with someone worthy." I sat there with that final letter for a long time, watching the sun set over my backyard, thinking about the man who wrote these words, the journey he'd taken from anger to acceptance. The fact that he'd carried me with him in some way for 25 years, even though I'd moved on completely. James came home the next day and found me on the couch surrounded by letters, and I told him I'd read them all, every single one, and he asked how I felt, and I said sad for him mostly, grateful it wasn't me. Sad that Marcus had spent decades writing letters to a ghost, to a version of me that had moved on and built a life he wasn't part of. Grateful that my life was real and full while his had apparently been stuck in this loop of regret and self-destruction. I thought about burning the letters, some dramatic gesture of letting go, but that felt performative and unnecessary, so I just put them back in the box, put the box in the attic, and moved on with my day because Marcus's words couldn't touch me anymore. Couldn't change my story, couldn't rewrite what actually happened. Zara found out about the letters somehow. Probably Alana mentioned them, and she asked if she could read them someday, and I said maybe when she's older. When she can understand the complexity of human nature without it damaging her view of love and relationships. I told her, "Your father and I have something real and healthy. What I had with Marcus was a cautionary tale, and I don't want you reading those letters and thinking that's what love looks like," and she understood, said she'd trust my judgment on when the time was right. The letters confirmed what I already knew, but it was validating to see it written in his own hand, that the cheating had nothing to do with me, that I could have been anyone, and he still would have sabotaged it, that his demons were his alone to wrestle with. I went back to the shelter the next week and told some of the women about the letters, about Marcus's deathbed confessions, and they had so many questions. Wanted to know if it gave me closure, if it changed how I felt, if I regretted anything. I told them it didn't change anything because I'd already done my healing, already understood intellectually what the letters confirmed emotionally, and the only thing I regretted was not leaving sooner, not trusting myself faster, not recognizing the red flags I spent years explaining away. One woman asked if I thought Marcus had really changed, if his growth was genuine or just the result of facing mortality, and I said, I think he did the work eventually, but it was too late. He'd already burned too many bridges, hurt too many people, wasted too much time. I said, that's the thing about doing the work late. You gain awareness, but you can't undo the damage. You understand why you were the way you were, but everyone you hurt has already moved on, and you're left with nothing but regrets and what-ifs. That seemed to resonate with them. This idea that timing matters, that you can't just wake up one day after decades of bad behavior and expect everything to be fixed, that some things once broken can't be repaired no matter how much therapy you do. James and I talked about the letters more over the next few weeks, processing what it meant that Marcus had carried this torch for so long while I'd completely moved on, and James said it's almost sad how uneven it was, you living your life and him stuck in the past. I agreed, but also said that's what happens when you don't do the work, when you don't heal properly. You get stuck in loops replaying the same patterns, and I'm grateful I broke that cycle when I did. We were lying in bed one night and James said, do you think you would have ended up with me if Marcus hadn't cheated? And I thought about it and said, eventually yes, because even if he hadn't cheated, he was the wrong person. I would have figured that out somehow. Maybe it would have taken longer, but I would have gotten there. He said, I'm grateful for however it happened. Grateful you were free when I met you. Grateful every day that Marcus was too stupid to appreciate what he had. And I kissed him and said, his loss was your gain, and I'm the real winner because I got you. Alana called around the 1-year anniversary of Marcus's death and asked how I was doing, if the letters had helped or hurt, and I told her they'd done neither really, just confirmed what I already knew. Gave me a window into her father's mind, but didn't change my story. She said she'd been reading them too, that Marcus had left copies for her, and it was helping her understand him better, helping her process her complicated grief about a father who'd loved her but couldn't quite show up for her the way she needed. I told her, you can love someone and still acknowledge they failed you. You can grieve them and still be angry at them. Healing isn't linear, and it doesn't require you to forgive everything, and she thanked me for giving her permission to feel multiple things at once. She's doing well now, engaged to someone who treats her right, and she told me, I think about your story when I'm with him, about how you knew to leave, about how you rebuilt, and it helps me recognize green flags because I grew up seeing so many red ones. That made me so happy, knowing that my story was helping her build something better, that Marcus's daughter was breaking the cycle, that maybe something good could come from all that pain after all. I'm 60 now, been writing this story for what feels like forever, and I realize it's not really a story about Marcus at all. It's a story about me, about becoming someone who couldn't be destroyed by betrayal, about building a life so good that the past becomes irrelevant. Marcus is gone, his letters are in my attic, his daughter is thriving, and I'm here with James planning our 30th anniversary trip, watching our grandkids grow up, mentoring the next generation of women who need to hear that survival is possible. Zara has a daughter now, my first grandchild, named her Maya, and watching her hold that baby made me so emotional, because this is the legacy that matters. 3 generations of women who know their worth, who won't settle, who will choose themselves when they need to. I told Zara Maya will never know Marcus. She'll never know that part of your history. She'll just grow up knowing she comes from a line of strong women who don't tolerate disrespect. And Zara said, exactly. That's the point. We don't pass down the trauma. We pass down the strength. Miles is getting married next spring to a wonderful woman who reminds me of myself at that age, full of hope and standards and no willingness to compromise either, and I'm so proud of the man he's become. So grateful he learned what love looks like by watching James and me. My career is winding down, thinking about full retirement in a few years, and when people ask what I'm most proud of, I don't talk about the promotions or the accomplishments. I talk about leaving Marcus, about choosing myself, about building something real from the rubble. That's my greatest achievement. Not my professional success or my beautiful family, though those are wonderful, but the simple act of walking away when staying would have been easier, of trusting myself when everyone had opinions, of rebuilding when it would have been simpler to stay broken. The letters are still in the attic. Haven't looked at them since that first reading, and I probably never will again. They served their purpose, confirmed what needed confirming, and now they're just paper in a box gathering dust while I'm down here living. Living fully, loving deeply, laughing often, choosing joy every single day, and that's the ultimate revenge, though I'm not trying to get revenge anymore. I'm just trying to live well, and it turns out living well is its own reward. I think about that woman standing outside room 804 sometimes, 26 years ago now, heart pounding, world about to implode, and I want to tell her, you're about to have the worst day of your life, and it's going to save you. It's going to crack you open so the light can get in. It's going to destroy you and remake you into someone incredible. I want to tell her, trust yourself, choose yourself, don't look back, and in 26 years you'll be exactly where you're supposed to be, happy beyond measure, grateful for everything including this moment that feels like it might kill you. But I can't go back, none of us can. All we can do is keep moving forward, keep choosing ourselves, keep building lives we're proud of, and hope that our stories help someone else find the courage to do the same. That's what this story has always been about. Not Marcus's betrayal, but my survival. Not what he did to me, but what I did for myself after. Not the breaking, but the rebuilding. And that's the story I'm still living every day. Marcus wrote letters for 25 years trying to make sense of what he'd lost, trying to apologize for what he'd done, trying to find peace with his choices, and all of that energy could have gone into being better, doing better, choosing better. But that was his journey, not mine. Mine was about letting go completely, about moving forward without looking back, about building something so good that the past becomes nothing more than a distant memory of who I used to be before I found myself. And I did find myself. Found strength I didn't know I had, found standards I'd been taught to compromise, found a voice I'd been taught to quiet, found everything I needed to not just survive but thrive. I'm 60 years old. Marcus has been dead for over a year. His letters are collecting dust, and I'm planning trips with my husband, spoiling my grandkids, mentoring young women, living a life that proves every single day that leaving was the right choice. That's the end of this story, the real end. Not because there's nothing left to say, but because I've said everything that matters, because Marcus is finally and completely irrelevant, because my life is full and his is over, and those two facts are completely unrelated now. I won, not because he died, but because I lived, really lived, fully and completely and without reservation, and that's the only victory that ever mattered. This is my story, my truth, my life, and I'm sharing it one last time so someone out there knows that survival is possible, that happiness is real, that leaving is sometimes the bravest and best thing you'll ever do. Walk away, choose yourself, trust the process, and I promise you'll end up somewhere beautiful, somewhere you can't even imagine right now when you're in the thick of it, somewhere that makes every painful moment worth it. That's my promise, my testimony, my truth, and I'm living proof every single day that it's possible to not just survive betrayal, but to use it as the foundation for something extraordinary. Marcus is gone, I'm still here, and that's exactly how this story was always meant to end. I thought Marcus's death and those letters would be the absolute final word, thought there was nothing left to uncover or process or understand. But life keeps teaching me that closure is never as simple as we want it to be. And the latest lesson came just last month in a way that completely blindsided me. I was at a women's leadership conference in Miami, giving a keynote about resilience and reinvention, when a woman approached me during the networking session and said, "You don't know me, but I need to talk to you about Marcus Thompson." And I felt my stomach drop because I thought I was done with this, done with people from that chapter emerging from nowhere. She was maybe 50, well-dressed, confident, and she said, "My name is Diane. I was married to Marcus between his first wife and Alana's mother, and I've been following your career for years, trying to work up the courage to reach out." And I realized Marcus had a whole other wife I'd never known about, another woman caught in his pattern. We found a quiet corner, and she told me her story. Married him 3 years after our divorce, left him 2 years later when she caught him cheating, and she said, "I've read interviews where you've talked about your divorce, and I need you to know you weren't alone." He did the same thing to me, probably worse because he'd learned how to hide it better. I felt this strange kinship with her, this woman I'd never met who'd loved the same broken man, who'd discovered the same betrayal, who'd made the same choice to leave, and I asked her why she was telling me this now after all these years. She said, "Because I saw your keynote topic and I knew you'd understand. I've spent 20 years building a life after him, successful career, happy remarriage, everything you talked about, but I still carry shame about how long I stayed, about the red flags I ignored, about believing his lies." I took her hand and said, "We all stayed too long. We all ignored red flags. We all believed lies because we wanted to believe in the man we thought we married, and there's no shame in that. The shame is his for being that man." And she started crying right there in the conference center. We talked for an hour, and she told me things about Marcus I'd never known, patterns I'd recognized, but she'd seen evolve, lies that got more sophisticated, manipulation that got more subtle. And I realized he'd spent his entire adult life perfecting the art of betrayal. She said, "I tried to find you years ago. Wanted to warn you that he was still talking about you, still using your relationship as the gold standard he measured everything against, but I couldn't track you down, and eventually I decided it wasn't my place." I told her about the letters, about the deathbed visit, about Alana, and she said, "He has another daughter too, from a relationship between me and Alana's mother. He was terrible to her too, abandoned her basically. She wants nothing to do with his memory." And I realized Marcus had left a trail of destruction wider than I'd ever imagined. We exchanged numbers and promised to stay in touch, and when I got back to my hotel room I called James and told him everything, and he said, "Baby, how many more versions of this story are going to emerge?" And I said, "I don't know, but I'm done letting them affect me." But they did affect me, not in the crushing way they would have 20 years ago, but in this low-grade way that made me question if I'd ever really known Marcus at all, if anyone had. Or if he was just a collection of masks he showed different people at different times. I couldn't stop thinking about Diane, about this other woman who'd lived a parallel version of my story, and I wondered how many more there were, how many women Marcus had cycled through, how many hearts he'd broken while writing letters to me about his regrets. I reached out to Alana and asked if she knew about Diane, and she said yes, that she'd found evidence of multiple marriages and relationships her father had hidden from everyone, that untangling his web of lies had become a full-time job after his death. She said, "I'm starting to think I didn't know him at all, that none of us did, that he was so busy performing different versions of himself for different people that there was no real person underneath." And I told her that might be closer to the truth than any of us wanted to admit. We talked about doing something together, the three of us, me and Diane and Alana, maybe writing a book or starting a podcast about narcissistic patterns in relationships, about how to recognize and escape them. But I wasn't sure I wanted to build a platform around Marcus, even if it could help people. James thought it was a good idea though, said, "You've been helping women one-on-one for decades. Maybe it's time to scale that impact. Use your story to reach thousands instead of dozens." And I told him I'd think about it, that I needed time to process whether I wanted to go public with everything. Zara was against it, said, "Mom, you've moved on. Why drag yourself back into that publicly? Why give him more of your energy?" And she had a point. I had moved on. My life was good. Did I really want to become known as the woman who'd been cheated on by a serial cheater? But Miles said, if it helps people, then maybe it's worth it. Maybe that's how you take something terrible and make it meaningful. And I appreciated his perspective, the idea that sharing could be service rather than dwelling. I met with Diane again a few weeks later, this time intentionally, just the two of us at a coffee shop in Atlanta, and we compared notes more thoroughly, timelines and patterns, and all the ways Marcus had used the same playbook on both of us. She said, "He told me the same things he probably told you, that his ex-wife didn't understand him, that you were too rigid, too unforgiving, that if you'd just given him another chance, everything would have been different." And I laughed, because of course he had. Of course he'd made me the villain in his story. I told her about finding him in that hotel room, and she told me about finding texts on his phone, and we realized we'd both had that same moment of clarity, that same instant where everything clicked and we knew we had to leave. And that shared experience felt sacred somehow. We decided to write the book together, not as a tell-all about Marcus, but as a guide for women recognizing narcissistic patterns, with our stories as case studies showing how the same tactics get used on different victims, how to spot them, how to escape. Alana wanted to contribute too, wanted to write about what it's like to be the daughter of a narcissist, to love someone who's fundamentally incapable of healthy attachment, and the three of us started meeting monthly to work on it. James was supportive but worried. He said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure it won't pull you back into darkness you've worked hard to escape?" And I promised him I was doing it from a place of strength, not woundedness, that I could tell this story without being consumed by it. The writing process was harder than I expected though, not emotionally but logistically, trying to tell the truth without making it gratuitous, trying to be helpful without being preachy, trying to honor our pain while focusing on healing. Diane struggled more than I did. Her wounds were older, but less processed. She hadn't done as much therapy, hadn't rebuilt as completely, and I found myself coaching her through panic attacks and self-doubt and moments where she wanted to quit. I realized that healing isn't linear, that even decades later something can trigger you back to that place of raw pain, and I was grateful I'd done my work early, that I'd built a foundation strong enough to withstand these aftershocks. Alana was the most raw of all of us, everything still fresh from losing her father, from discovering he wasn't who she thought, from processing that her entire childhood might have been based on lies. And I held space for her grief while gently pushing us all forward. The book took 2 years to write, 2 years of dredging up memories I'd filed away, 2 years of coordinating with 2 other women who'd loved the same man at different times, 2 years of making peace with sharing my story at this scale. We found a publisher, a woman-owned press that specialized in memoirs about surviving toxic relationships, and they loved it, said it was exactly what women needed. A roadmap out of narcissistic abuse written by survivors who'd not just escaped but thrived. The book came out last spring, got some attention, modest success, nothing that would make it a bestseller, but enough that we knew we'd reached people who needed it, and the emails started coming in almost immediately. Women writing to say they recognized themselves in our stories, thanking us for putting words to patterns they'd sensed but couldn't name, telling us they'd left because of what we'd shared, and those emails made every difficult moment of writing worth it. One woman wrote, "I'm standing outside my own room 804 right now, your book in my hand, and I'm about to knock, and I wanted you to know that your courage 28 years ago is giving me courage today, and I cried reading that. Grateful my pain had become someone else's permission." We did some book events, the three of us together, and it was powerful to stand on stage with Diane and Alana to tell our interconnected stories, to show the audience how one man's pattern had affected 3 generations of women, but hadn't defeated any of us. People asked if we were angry at Marcus, and we all answered honestly, no, not anymore. Anger had given way to understanding, to pity, to a kind of detached compassion for someone who'd been so broken he'd broken everyone he touched. They asked if we forgave him, and that answer was more complicated. Yes, in the sense that we'd released the anger. No, in the sense that forgiveness doesn't erase accountability, and we tried to model that nuance. That you can heal without absolving someone of what they did. James came to one of the events and watched from the back, and afterward he said, "I'm so proud of you, not just for surviving, but for using what you survived to help others." And I felt so grateful to have a partner who celebrated my strength instead of feeling threatened by it. Zara read the book and came to me crying, said, "Mom, I had no idea it was this bad. I knew the basic story, but reading the details, understanding the manipulation, it makes me so grateful you left." And I held her and said, "That's why I wrote it. So you and Maya and every woman after you knows what to look for." Miles read it too and said it changed how he thinks about relationships, about the responsibility men have to do their own work, about how much damage unhealed trauma can cause, and I was glad the book was reaching men too, helping them understand their role in breaking these cycles. The book has been out for 8 months now, and we're working on a second one, this time focused specifically on rebuilding, on what comes after you leave, on how to construct a life that's not just different from what you had but better in every way. Diane is engaged again. 3rd time's the charm, she jokes, to a man who's been patient with her healing, who read the book before she even told him about it, who said, "I see you, all of you, and I'm not scared," and I'm so happy she found that. Alana is pregnant with her 2nd child, thriving in her career, in therapy regularly, doing the work to ensure she doesn't repeat patterns she learned growing up, and I'm so proud of the woman she's becoming despite everything. I'm 62 now, grandmother to 3, still married to James after 32 years, still mentoring women, still speaking at conferences, still building a legacy that has nothing to do with Marcus and everything to do with who I became after him. The book sits on my shelf alongside other accomplishments, degrees and awards and photos of my family, and it represents something important, proof that I took the worst thing that ever happened to me and turned it into something that helps people. Marcus would probably hate the book if he were alive to read it, would claim we misrepresented him, exaggerated his flaws, made him into a villain when he was just a flawed human making mistakes, and maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe we'll never fully understand what drove him. But understanding him was never the point. Understanding ourselves was. Understanding how we got caught in his web, and more importantly, how we got out. And that's the story that matters. Not his motivations, but our liberation. I still get emails sometimes from women in the thick of it, begging for advice, asking if it gets better, wondering if they're strong enough to leave, and I always respond the same way. Yes, it gets better. Yes, you're strong enough. Yes, choosing yourself is worth it. I tell them my life now, the peace and joy and genuine happiness, and I say, this is waiting for you on the other side of that door. This life you can't even imagine right now when you're drowning in his chaos, but it's there. I promise it's there. And it is there. I'm living proof. Diane's living proof. Thousands of women who've left toxic relationships are living proof. You can survive. You can thrive. You can build something beautiful from the ashes. That's the message of the book. That's the message of my life. That's what I want every woman who's ever doubted herself or stayed too long or accepted less than she deserved to know. You can leave. You should leave. And what's waiting on the other side is worth every difficult moment. Marcus is still gone. His legacy is still complicated. His daughters are still processing. His ex-wives are still healing. But we're all doing it on our terms now. Not defined by him, but refined by what we learned surviving him. The book tour wraps up next month, and then I'm finally done. Done telling this story publicly. Done mining this pain for lessons. Done looking backward instead of forward. And I'm ready for that. Ready to close this chapter completely and focus on what comes next. What comes next is retirement, travel, grandkids, maybe another book about something totally different, maybe nothing but quiet days with James and family dinners and the simple joy of a life well lived, and that sounds perfect. I've done what I needed to do, helped who I could help, shared what needed sharing, and now I'm ready to just be, not Marcus's ex-wife, not a survivor of betrayal, not an author or speaker or mentor, just me, fully myself, finally and completely free. That freedom tastes better than anything else ever has, better than revenge, better than vindication, better than his deathbed apologies or posthumous letters, just the pure sweet taste of knowing I survived and thrived and have nothing left to prove. This is really truly the end now, the last word, the final paragraph, not because there's nothing more to say, but because I've said everything that matters, and now it's time to live the rest of my life in private peace rather than public testimony. Marcus was a chapter, a difficult, painful, necessary chapter, but chapters end, books close, and new stories begin, and my new story has nothing to do with him and everything to do with joy and presence and gratitude. That's where I'm leaving this, in gratitude, grateful for surviving, grateful for thriving, grateful for every woman I've helped and every lesson I've learned and every moment of peace I've fought for and won. This is my story, from that Instagram message 28 years ago to this moment right now, and I'm proud of every word, every choice, every moment I chose myself over comfortable misery. And to anyone still reading, still processing, still wondering if they can do it, I'm telling you one last time, you can, you will, you already have the strength inside you, you just have to choose to use it. Choose yourself, walk away, don't look back, and I promise you'll end up somewhere better than you can possibly imagine right now, somewhere that makes everything worth it. That's my final word, my last testimony, my closing statement, and I mean it with everything I am. Survival is possible, happiness is real, and you deserve both. Now I'm done, really done, finally done, and I'm walking away from this story just like I walked away from Marcus, with my head high and my heart full and my future bright. That's the end. I promised myself that was the end, swore I'd close that chapter for good, but life has this way of circling back when you think you finally moved on, and the circle completed itself in the most unexpected way just 3 weeks ago. I was at the grocery store, mundane Tuesday afternoon, picking up ingredients for dinner, when I turned down the cleaning supplies aisle, and there she was, the woman from the hotel room, the one Marcus had been with that day 28 years ago, and we both froze. She looked older, obviously, we all do, but I recognized her immediately, those same eyes that had looked at me with shock and confusion when I'd pushed open that hotel door. And I could tell she recognized me too, because her face went pale and her hand gripped the cart like she might fall over. We stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably 30 seconds, just staring at each other, and then she said, "I'm so sorry, I know that's not enough, I know it's been almost 3 decades, but I'm so sorry." And her voice cracked and I realized she'd been carrying this guilt all these years. I said, "You didn't know he was married. I was there, I saw your face. You were a victim too." And she started crying right there in the grocery store. These quiet tears that told me she needed to hear that for 28 years. We abandoned our carts and went to a coffee shop across the street, and she told me her story. Her name was Nicole. She'd been 24 when she met Marcus, brand new to Atlanta, working as a bartender. And he'd swept her off her feet with charm and attention and promises. She said, "He told me he was divorced, showed me the papers even. I had no idea you were still his wife until you showed up, and when you left I confronted him, and he admitted everything, and I left that day too, never spoke to him again." I believed her, could hear the truth in her voice, and I said, "Thank you for leaving him. Thank you for not making excuses for him. Thank you for having standards even when you'd been lied to." And she looked at me like I'd just absolved her of something she'd been carrying forever. She said, "I've thought about you so many times over the years, wondered if you were okay, if you'd recovered, if you blamed me, and I wanted to reach out but I was too ashamed, too scared you'd hate me." I told her I'd never hated her, that my anger had always been directed at Marcus where it belonged, and I told her about my life now, about James and the kids and the book and how I'd turned that terrible day into something meaningful. She told me she'd gotten married 5 years ago to someone honest and kind, but that she'd struggled with trust for years, had been in therapy processing what Marcus had done, had second-guessed every relationship because of how thoroughly he'd fooled her. I said, "He fooled all of us. That's what narcissists do. They're expert manipulators, and there's no shame in being manipulated by an expert." And she nodded and said, "I've been telling myself that for years, but hearing it from you makes it real." We talked for 2 hours, comparing notes, filling in gaps in each other's stories, and I learned things about that day I'd never known, like how Marcus had begged her not to leave, had promised he'd fix things with me, had tried to make her feel guilty for ruining his marriage. She said I told him he ruined his own marriage and walked out with nothing but my purse, left my clothes there, left everything, just needed to get away from him, and I respected her so much for that, for having clarity even at 24. I told her about Diane and Alana and the book, and she asked if she could read it, said I need to understand the pattern, need to know I wasn't alone in this, and I promised to send her a copy. Said maybe her story could be in the next one if she was comfortable sharing. She said, I want other young women to know what to watch for, to know that men can lie with court documents and straight faces and complete conviction, and you're not stupid for believing them." We exchanged numbers and hugged goodbye, and I drove home feeling this strange sense of completion, like a circle that had been open for 28 years had finally closed, like every woman Marcus had hurt was connected now. A network of survivors supporting each other. I told James about running into Nicole, and he said, "That's wild. What are the odds?" And I said, "Maybe there are no odds. Maybe the universe wanted us to meet, wanted me to release her from guilt she shouldn't have been carrying." I sent Nicole the book, and she called me after reading it, said, "This is exactly what I needed. Validation that I wasn't crazy, that what I experienced was real, that his pattern was deliberate, not accidental." And I was so glad the book could serve that purpose. She asked if we could meet again, and we started having coffee once a month, just checking in, sharing updates, building a friendship neither of us expected but both of us needed, and I realized that healing happens in community, that we're not meant to survive trauma alone. Nicole met Diane and Alana too. The 4 of us had dinner together, and sitting around that table with 3 other women who'd all loved and left the same man felt surreal and powerful and healing in ways I didn't know I still needed. We joked about starting a support group, Survivors of Marcus Thompson, and then we realized that's essentially what we'd created, an informal network of women helping each other process and heal and move forward, and it felt right. Alana said, "My father left destruction everywhere he went, but look what grew from it. Look at this community of strong women who refused to stay broken." And she was right. Marcus's legacy wasn't just pain. It was also the strength we'd found in surviving him. The second book came out this fall, and we included Nicole's story with her permission, and the response was even stronger than the first time. Women saying they'd been the other woman and never told anyone, never processed their own victimhood. And now they finally could. We started getting invited to speak at universities, at women's organizations, at therapy conferences, the 4 of us together telling our interconnected stories, showing how one person's pattern can affect so many lives, but doesn't have to define them. James comes to some of the events now, sits in the audience, and afterward women approach him asking what it's like to love someone who's survived this kind of trauma, and he's honest, says it requires patience and understanding and never taking trust for granted. He said, "But it's worth it, she's worth it. The depth she has because of what she's survived makes her capacity for love and joy even greater," and hearing him say that in public made me fall in love with him all over again. Zara's daughter Maya is 5 now, and she asked me the other day, "Grandma, why do you talk about mean men all the time?" And I realized we'd been so focused on the work that we'd brought it home in ways we shouldn't have, that she deserved innocence. I told her I talk about them so other grandmas' granddaughters never have to meet them, and she said, "That's good, Grandma. You're like a superhero." And I thought about how different her world would be from mine, how she'd grow up with language for abuse, with permission to leave, with models of healthy love. The speaking engagements have slowed down. We're all getting older. Diane is 65 now and wants to retire. Alana has 2 kids and a demanding career. Nicole just opened her own business, and I'm ready to step back, to let the books speak for themselves. We did one final event last month, billed as our farewell tour, and the room was packed. Standing room only, women of all ages who'd read the books or heard about them, or just needed to know that survival was possible. We each spoke about where we are now, not about Marcus, but about the lives we'd built, and then we opened it up for questions, and a young woman in the back stood up and said, "I'm in the hotel hallway right now, metaphorically, and I'm scared. Tell me it's worth it to knock." The 4 of us answered in unison, "Knock," and the room erupted in applause, and the young woman was crying, and I knew we'd done what we set out to do. We'd created a roadmap. We'd offered hope. We'd proven that happiness after betrayal isn't just possible. It's probable if you do the work. After that event, the 4 of us went to dinner, and we toasted to Marcus, not with gratitude, but with acknowledgement. Here's to the man who broke us and inadvertently introduced us to our own strength, and we all laughed because it was true. We'd found ourselves by losing him. Nicole said, "I can't believe I wasted even 6 months on him," and Diane said, "Try 2 years," and Alana said, "Try a lifetime of wishing he was different," and I said, "We all wasted time, but we got it back with interest. Look at us now." And looking at us, for women from different generations and backgrounds and circumstances, united by one man's dysfunction, but defined by our own resilience, I felt overwhelming gratitude not for what we'd survived, but for who we'd become. I'm 63 now. Marcus has been dead for almost 3 years, and I can finally say without hesitation that I'm glad I knew him, because knowing him led me to myself, and myself is pretty damn great. James and I are planning a trip around the world for our 35th anniversary. 6 months of just wandering and exploring and being present with each other, and I'm so excited to do it while we're still young enough to enjoy it. The grandkids are growing, Maya and her little brother Jackson and Alana's 2 daughters, and we have family dinners every Sunday where the kids run around and the adults drink wine, and nobody talks about Marcus unless someone specifically asks. My career is over, officially retired last month, and my legacy is secure, not in corporate achievements, but in the women I've helped, the stories I've shared, the difference I've made by refusing to suffer in silence. The letters are still in the attic. Nicole asked if she could read them, and I said no, they weren't mine to share. They were Marcus's pathetic attempt at redemption, and they should stay private, should die with him. The book has sold over 100,000 copies now, been translated into 12 languages, and we still get emails daily from women saying it changed their lives, gave them permission to leave, showed them what happiness looks like after heartbreak. That impact matters more than anything else I've ever done, more than promotions or awards or recognition. Knowing that my worst day became someone else's catalyst for change, that's legacy, that's purpose, that's meaning. I think about that Instagram message sometimes, the one from Shanice that started all of this, and I wonder where I'd be if she hadn't sent it, if I discovered the cheating some other way, or maybe never discovered it at all. And I'm grateful she was brave enough to get involved. I reached out to her recently, we hadn't talked in a while, and told her about the book and Nicole and everything that had happened, and she said, "Girl, I had no idea that one message would lead to all this. I was just trying to look out for you." I told her, "You did more than look out for me. You saved my life. Not literally, but in every way that matters." And she said, "No, baby, you saved your own life. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it." And she's right. Shanice showed me the truth, but I'm the one who chose to face it, chose to leave, chose to rebuild, chose myself over and over until choosing myself became natural, and that choice made all the difference. This really is the end now, not because there's nothing left to say, but because I've lived long enough past Marcus that he's become a footnote, a piece of history, a story I tell sometimes, but not a reality I live in ever. My reality is James and grandkids and retirement and travel and friendship and peace. My reality is waking up grateful every single day. My reality is knowing with absolute certainty that leaving was the best decision I ever made. Marcus was wrong about so many things, but he was right about one. Losing me was his biggest mistake. Not because I was perfect, but because I was real and loyal and willing to build something meaningful, and he threw that away for nothing that lasted. But his loss was never my problem. His regret was never my burden, and his death doesn't change anything except confirming what I already knew, that I survived him, that I built something better without him, that I won by every measure that matters. I'm closing this story now, permanently, completely, with gratitude for every woman who read it and found strength, with love for the community it created, with peace about every choice I made along the way. To Marcus, wherever he is, I hope you found peace eventually. I hope you understood the damage you caused. I hope you learned something before you died, but whether you did or didn't doesn't matter to me anymore. To every woman who's lived some version of this story, who's standing outside their own room 804, who's reading a message that's about to change everything, I'm telling you one final time with everything I have. Walk through that door. Choose yourself. Don't look back. Your best life is waiting. I promise it's waiting, and 28 years from now you'll be exactly where you're supposed to be, happy and whole and grateful you were brave enough to leave. That's my truth. That's my promise. That's my legacy, and I'm at peace with all of it. This is the end, the real, absolute final end, and I'm walking away from this story with my head high and my heart full, closing the book on Marcus Thompson forever. Goodbye to all of it, the pain and the healing and the telling and the retelling. I'm done now, finally and completely done. I'm going to live the rest of my life in joy and presence and gratitude, and Marcus Thompson will never cross my mind again unless I choose to let him, and I'm choosing not to. That's freedom, that's victory, that's everything, and that's where this story ends. For real this time. Forever.